Turks special coverage of the tanks but no tanks military parade for Donald Trump and the US Army. Now it's theoretically for the US Army, but of course it's actually for Donald Trump. And it is his birthday, and we will be celebrating that in our own way here. Cenk Uygur, Ben Cohen, legendary Ben Cohen, my co-host for today. How you doing, Ben?
I'm doing really good. I'm very psyched to give all the audience the real story behind the parade and the real facts of what we're going to see rolling by.
100%. So boy, do we have facts for you guys. We'll tell you about the military spending and how much all of this costs, the parade, the military itself. We're gonna give you context. By the end, you're gonna be like, this is amazing. I never thought I'd get this many facts with a military parade and a birthday party. Nobody saw it, okay? Tapper will write a book about how no one saw it coming. As you can tell, the parade has begun. And I'm going to tell you what you're looking at there in 1 second. But you saw the president and Melania Trump, the first lady. Hey, they're together for the first time in a couple of years. They're both at the parade, but it is his birthday. That would be kind of mean if she didn't show up for his birthday. And a little bit later on, we're going to have great guests joining us, Colonel Larry Wilkerson. And he, of course, was with Colin Powell and went on to conclude that what we did in Iraq was disastrous, and so as he was in that Bush administration, so he's got a really interesting perspective. We've got Christian Sorensen, who's an expert on the military and has been in the military. We've got Nina Turner coming up later in the program, and then of course Ojeda, 24 years in the military and now running for Congress in North Carolina 9, where Fort Bragg is. So he'll be joining us, and he's usually fiery. So Ben, let me start by setting the table here for what people are going to see today, okay? So number one, this parade actually began excruciatingly early, but don't worry, you didn't miss the actual marching, right? It started at 11 a.m. Eastern, for the Army Birthday Festival in the National Mall. And so at that point, soldiers, Army, astronaut, randomly NFL representatives, and Medal of Honor recipients were on hand. But the actual parade itself started a little bit before 6:30 p.m. Eastern. It was supposed to start at 6:30, but they got going a little bit earlier than that. We're gonna get to the cost of it in a second. That's part of obviously a big part of our coverage here. We're gonna give you all the details. And by the way, another fact about today is, since it's Donnie's birthday, he is turning 79. So 79 is an age, it really is. So we'll come back to that at different times. But I wanted to let you guys know about the order of things. The reason why you saw some folks there who looked like they had some kind of funny looking outfits, like, wait, what's going on here, is they're going through the different eras of the military. So the Revolutionary War is what apparently kicked things off, but they must be, maybe we could still see them because they're going on along a path here, and the path is supposed to take 90 minutes. But the Revolutionary War was in the beginning, which makes sense, going along with our American history. Then the Civil War, and then World War I. And so when we just came in, I believe they were showing World War I soldiers, okay? And now this looks to be World War II, if I'm not mistaken. Am I a military expert? No. Am I a talking expert? Yes. Is Ben an ice cream expert? Yes. Okay. But nevertheless, I have a great story, Ben, for you about World War II, if that is in fact World War II, and those exact kind of Jeeps in a minute. And then Korean War, then Vietnam War, and then Gulf War, War on Terror, then the modern army, and then the future army, where we're going to waste a tremendous amount of money on Golden Dome. So we're going to talk about that as well, okay? So, there's Trump getting up, saluting. Okay, there's his signature too long red tie, pants hiked up too much. Look, I'm no one to comment, okay? Ben and I are not fashion gurus. No one suggested we were. So, but he does have a signature look. Anyway, I don't know why he gets up at that point and not at other times. Is he going to get up every single time soldiers go by? Because they keep going by. What? He sat down. Very disrespectful. Very disrespectful. This looks like, I'm making this stuff up as we go along because it's fun. This looks like, I'm going to guess, Korean War. Interesting. I have stories about the Korean War. I'm filled with war stories, even though I've never been to war. So that's also fun. So Ben, you ready to start with the World War II story?
Yeah. Let me hear a World War II story. That was like before I was born.
Yeah. Okay. My original co-host on the Young Turks is Ben Mankiewicz. Okay, and he's one of my co-founders. So Ben's got an interesting kind of legendary family. And I was lucky enough to meet his dad, and he was an amazing guy. So his grandfather was Herman Mankiewicz, who wrote Citizen Kane. His uncle is Joe Mankiewicz, All About Eve, Cleopatra, etc. So they were huge in Hollywood. But then Frank, his father, decided not to go into Hollywood. And the Mankiewiczes are legendarily bad with money. So there's that anti-Semitic trope about all the Jews are good with money. No. That just means you don't know enough Jews. So Frank gave away his house. I say gave away because he sold his house in Beverly Hills for $35,000.
Whoa,
No, okay. But Frank was an amazing guy. He was Bobby Kennedy's press secretary. So tragically, he was the one that announced Bobby's death. He was McGovern's campaign manager and pulled off the 1972 primary miracle, where McGovern, as an anti-war candidate, won the Democratic primary. And then Frank did Peace Corps Latin America. He was the head president of NPR. But I tell you all this because one of the many legendary things he did was he was in World War II. And I said, Frank, that must have been amazing. How did it feel being Jewish and fighting the Nazis? Like if I was in your situation and I made it back home alive, I'd feel enormously proud, right? So how'd you feel? And he said, I was scared the whole time. It's like, so that was my main thing. And he's like, the main thing I was worried about was my fingers. I was like, interesting, right? So what happened, Ben, was he drove one of those Jeeps that we just saw going by, right? So his two main fears were, one was he had to drive through these cliffs and narrow roads. He's like, forget the Nazis. I was so afraid of driving off the cliff, on one of those night trips. Oh my God. And then his second job was to load the missile thing on the top of the Jeep where and then you remember in the old days, they dropped a missile in and then it pops back out. And he's like, as he's putting it in, you got to take your fingers away before the missile comes back out, right? So he's like, I had nightmares about losing my fingers the entire war, okay? And I said, so do you know if you ever killed any Germans, Nazis, etc.? He's like, I have no idea, brother. Okay, he's like, I did that missile thing. I don't know where it landed. And then he's like, one time we got caught in a firefight in the woods, so they're kind of out of the movies, right? And I said, so do you know what happened there? And he's like, no, I was just shooting like this behind me and running for my life. Okay. And I said, so do you have any memorabilia? He's like, well, so in that fight in the woods, one of a Nazi officer had been killed, okay? And he's like, I needed a new gun because I ran out of bullets. So what am I gonna do? I'm in the middle of a war.
What? He couldn't just get more bullets? He needed the whole new gun?
I don't know, but
a little like the modern day army.
Good point, Ben. But I don't think that that's a moment where you tell a Jewish American running from the Nazis, hey, you're being a little wasteful. Right? So he said he grabbed one of the guns from the Nazi officer, right? And I said, wow, that sounds like, yeah. And he says it's super rare and it might be an amazing memorabilia piece, which by the way, you should not have unless you're Jewish. And I said, so where is it, Frank? He said, oh, no. I traded it for a coat. I said, what'd you do that for? And he said, because I was cold.
What is this the same guy who sold his house for 35,000 in LA?
Yeah, yeah. so, so, and I said, so do you regret that? And he said, no, you have to remember, he said, after the war was over, it took like 6 months for all the ships to come and pick us up and bring us back, pick us up and bring us back. And it was winter in Europe. So it was the best trade I ever made. That coat kept me warm. I love that coat. He's like, I didn't need that gun. The war was over. So very, very sensible, unless you were talking about money. Okay.
Yeah. But he was warm.
Yeah, but he was warm, and you know what? Frank Banquet's tip of the hat to you, brother. He was warm in every way. So that look, we start with a warm and fuzzy warm story. Okay?
Well, warmth in every way, I think, is what we need a little more of in the country. I mean, what's driving me crazy is that they're so cold and heartless. I think, Congress and the Trump administration, they've just lost their heart. I mean, they're the ones that are saying that the problem with the West is that we have too much empathy. Yeah, I want some warmth back. I want what was that? Your uncle? I want his warmth.
Yeah. So that would be amazing, and I'm not sure you can have too much empathy. I mean, you know what would be great is if everyone tried to have too much empathy.
You used to hear about what would Jesus do. I don't know why it's gone out of vogue, but we need that more than ever. I mean, the guy is the Prince of Peace. He's all about helping people, not killing them. And we're doing just the opposite. And everybody tells me it's a Christian nation. I don't understand it.
Yeah, look, a lot of people caught feelings the other day but that happens often when I tweet or I do broadcasts and stuff. But when I asked that same question, Ben, on X, I said, what happened to the good Christians? And I'm not saying that like in some sort of sarcastic way. I'm being literal about it because I've heard of good Christians my whole life, and I'm positive they exist. Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. was a great Christian and my role model, right? So there are wonderful, wonderful Christians out there. But guys, I mean, this is the moment, as the genocide in Gaza is happening, where I mean, this is time to show up and prove yourself. And yeah.
No, I've gotten to know a group called Red Letter Christians, and they call themselves Red Letter Christians because in some versions of the Bible, the actual words of Jesus Christ are written in red. And that's what they follow. They follow the actual words of Christ instead of the institutionalized religions that seem to have thrown the words of Christ out the window. But there is this organization, Red Letter Christians. They've got a website. They've recently arranged a demonstration in front of Lockheed Martin. They got arrested. There's a lot of good Christian religious leaders that truly believe in the words of Christ in that organization. One of the leaders is a guy named Shane Claiborne. He wrote a book called Jesus for President, which was a bestseller, actually. Yeah. Well, there's a lot of good ones out there.
Well, Ben, you and I did not support Jesus for president, but we did support a Jewish carpenter for president.
Indeed. I mean, right. I like him. I mean, I think the guy's great.
Yeah. So for those of you who don't know, Bernie Sanders was literally a carpenter earlier in his life. And so we're huge fans of Jewish carpenters here. Okay. So, and look, I had got into a conversation the other day on the Brilliant Idiots podcast with Charlemagne the God and Andrew Schultz about religion. And we talked about some of the downsides, but we also talked about the upsides and how the Sermon on the Mount is a beautiful thing. How I've never gone to a mosque where an imam didn't spend the first 45 minutes telling you to look out for the poor and the needy, right? So and there's beautiful traditions in Jewish culture, including, by the way, questioning leaders. And that's part of what I love about Jewish culture is that you're supposed to question the rabbi, right? And so you don't get that enough in other religions. Anyways, the point is that there are these. Oh, here one more. Reverend William Barber in North Carolina. In a lot of ways, the moral soul of the country. He's a wonderful, wonderful man, constantly fighting for the poor and the needy, right? So, and that's where we could be spending the money instead of this military parade, right?
I tell you, man, it wouldn't take a very large percentage of the current Pentagon budget to feed and provide food self-sufficiency for every hungry person in the United States and around the world. I mean, it's kind of unbelievable, but when you got a $1 trillion Pentagon budget, 20% of it goes a long way.
Yeah, so we're going to tell you about the Pentagon budget a little bit later in the show. We're also going to tell you how it compares to some of the ways that we could be spending money. And we're also going to tell you pretty soon about the cost of this parade as well. But Ben, and I'm going to tell you all the different things in it in a minute. But before we get there, Ben, on Thursday you launched Up in Arms. So tell us what Up in Arms is.
Up in Arms is a campaign to take back the American dream by bringing some common sense to the Department of Defense and using a bunch of the excess monies there to fund housing, healthcare, education, childcare, the things that people want and need in their everyday lives. And we can do it. It's amazing. So we had a launch event in DC on Thursday. We're starting off by focusing on nuclear weapons. One nuclear bomb did a whole lot of damage in Hiroshima. Over 100,000 people died. But the current nuclear arsenal of the United States is the equivalent of 50,000 Hiroshima-sized bombs. I mean, wow. It's absurd. I mean, supposedly our nuclear arsenal is supposed to be a deterrent, but how many times do you have to destroy the entire world to have a deterrent? So, so we spend $100 million a year on that, and half of it is to build a whole new generation of nuclear weapons that they're planning on spending $2 trillion on. It's kind of unbelievable. And, for that amount of money, I mean, right now, the government has made a decision that instead of preventing lead poisoning, because we know how to prevent it, we need to replace lead pipes. We need to, get rid of chipping lead paint in low-income apartments. Instead of coming up with the money to do that, they decide to use it on more nuclear weapons. It's absurd. I mean, we need to switch from a way of being that is death-defying to a way of being that's life-affirming. And
that's beautiful.
I mean, the amazing thing about it is that we've got all the money we need. It doesn't cost any extra money. We're just spending it in the wrong place.
Yes, and in fact, a little bit, we're going to show you the places we're spending in and the places we should be spending in. Let me do a little bit of devil's advocate there, Ben. So what people will say is, well, I mean, we have enough nukes. I get what you're saying, but we have to keep upgrading them because the Chinese are going to upgrade theirs and the Russians are going to upgrade theirs. And so if we don't have the latest upgrade, we might get caught off guard.
Well, I mean, you send a nuclear weapon, we have virtually no nuclear weapons that are as small as the one that blew up Hiroshima. I mean, you send a nuclear weapon, you kill 300,000 people. I mean, how many times do you have to do that? It's about a deterrent force. I mean, we're not actually, I mean, I guess there's starting to be some people saying, oh yeah, we can win a nuclear war. I mean, that's absurd.
Insane.
But what everybody tells me, what I hear, what I understand from the government is that the purpose of nuclear weapons is to be a deterrent. And if that's the case, we're spending way more money than we need to have a deterrent. It's not a deal where you have to keep up with the other guy. If he's got more deterrence than you've still got enough to deter him from blowing you up, him or her.
But Ben, is that really right? I mean, think about it. What if they have enough to blow up the world 40 times over, but we could only blow up the world 28 times over, right?
Boy, that would be humiliating, wouldn't it?
I mean, it's like dark humor, but it really is. It's really nuts.
It's sick. It's irrational. It's immoral. It's insane. And it's our fucking, it's our money.
Yes, I mean, that's what we've been emphasizing, whether it's the money we're sending over to Israel for the wars, or it's money we're wasting at the Pentagon, or any of this, or corporate subsidies. Why are we doing corporate subsidies when the American people need that money? Ben, what's amazing is that some people online started saying, Cenk, you kind of sound like America first. And I said, look, I love the rest of the world, so I wouldn't call myself America first in the way that Steve Bannon thinks of America first, right? But am I Americans first instead of corporations or foreign governments or defense contractors? Yeah. I
think we think about a lot of other countries in Scandinavia that have what they call social democracies. And those are capitalistic countries, they're democratic countries, but they put society first, people first. What we've got is a corporate democracy, and we put corporations first. I mean, we even have a Supreme Court that's decided that corporations are people. And that they're entitled to the same Bill of Rights that regular people are entitled to. So you have these big food corporations, that are supposed to be inspected by the USDA, and the inspector comes around and they claim it's an illegal search and seizure. And then you have the other Supreme Court ruling that says that money is free speech, and that goes for corporations too, because they're a person. And what you get is a government that's of the corporations, for the corporations, by the corporations.
No truer words have ever been spoken on any broadcast. So all you watching, you're welcome. So no, that's 100% right. That's what's happened. That's what a lot of my book is about. The book is Justice is Coming. And I explain the 4th chapter, how the Democratic Party got captured by corporate interests. And it's because of those Supreme Court decisions that Ben is referring to, where they decided that corporations are human beings. What a joke. What a ridiculous.
It's known officially as a legal fiction. That's the official name of it.
How could it be a legal fiction and a human being at the same time? They're not even trying to make sense, right? And then when they said that money is speech and that corporations can spend unlimited money basically buying politicians, Byron Whizzer White was one of the Supreme Court justices. Actually, he's a brilliant guy and played on the Detroit Lions for a little while. So a star football player at University of Michigan. And he wrote basically, this will be the death of democracy. This decision will ruin, he said, it is a mortal danger to our democracy. And that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, and my understanding, I mean, for a long time, and it picked up right after Citizens United. There's been this movement to amend the Constitution to overturn Citizens United and make it so that you can regulate how much money people can spend. And there's an organization called American Promise that's been working on that for a long time. And just since this recent election, there's been a real uptick in people involved in it. And there's been, I think, like 4 more states. I think there's now something like 26 states that have voted in favor of a constitutional amendment.
Yeah, and I formed a group called Wolfpack, and Ben has helped out on that as well to get money out of politics, and that's amazing. So, guys, we have a lot more to tell you guys. I want to tell you what's in this parade. I want to tell you about some of the images that you're seeing on the screen. I'm going to take some of your comments in a second. But first, I want to say about the things that you're looking at. They keep showing people in the crowd. The last person they showed was Senator Joni Ernst. And she's the one that made the comment recently about how people said in a town hall, her constituents said, hey, people are going to die if you take away their health care through these Medicaid cuts. And she said, we're all going to die. Who cares? And then she made like a sarcastic video afterwards, rubbing it in more. So I wonder if she leaned into her partner here as they're watching and go, oh yeah, a lot of people died in these wars. So what? They were going to die anyway, right? So
that's what I'm saying. That our leaders have lost their hearts. We need to put heart back in it. Now it's become just money, transactional money. You pay me money, I'll do whatever you want. You pay me more money, I'll do more of what you want.
Yeah, 100%.
What's this vehicle that's going by? Because we're supposed to be giving a play-by-play.
Yeah. So I'm going to tell you that right now. And you know what would have been hilarious is if they put Dukakis in one of these tanks.
Well, that does look kind of like an old one. What are they still on the vintage military stuff?
So that's the vintage stuff. For the modern stuff, I know they have 28 M1 Abrams tanks.
Yeah, I got something to say about that.
They've got 28 Bradley fighting vehicles.
I got a lot to say about that.
They've got 50 helicopters, including AH-64 Apache helicopters.
I don't know much about Apache helicopters.
And UH-60 Black Hawk helicopters, and you guys saw some of those going by a minute ago. And then you've got.
You're gonna have to be the aircraft guy.
No, we're gonna bring in experts for that. I'm definitely not the aircraft guy. We've got some Chinook helicopters, and then historical aircraft like the P-51 Mustang. And 7,500 troops will be marching through here, and 34 horses, which I feel like it's not enough horses given the rest of this parade. Okay,
who's picking up the horse poop?
Well, that's part of the cost, and we're going to tell you about the cost, guys. We're already look at how quickly a half an hour went by. So we're going to take a super quick break here. When we come back, an expert that tells us about some of this equipment that we're seeing and some of the military stuff that's happening here in the parade. We'll also later tell you about the No Kings protests throughout the country. And we'll read some of your comments as well that you're giving at tyt.com or on our YouTube channel on the Young Turks. All right, we'll be right back.
Damn it, they failed us. And if you're not angry about that, Michael, and any of you out there, then you're damn wrong, because you should be angry. Young Turks.
It was genuine. He was mad. Cenk Uygur, known online as one of the young Turks, isn't afraid to throw some punches.
3, 2, 1, fade up.
Cenk the Turk Uygur.
What kind of TV station is this?
The whole point is for me to yell and scream and tell you what I think.
It was right out of like Wayne's World.
This guy on this little rinky-dink website is speaking truth to power.
We've been averaging 600,000 views a day, beating most of the cable shows in America.
We're the largest online news show in the world.
We're celebrating our 1 billionth view.
Television, we're coming.
More politics ahead with Cenk Uygur.
He knew that the MSNBC opportunity was an experiment.
If Phil and host beat CNN and headline news combined, at some point, they want to give me a show.
Every single year, that comes out of our paycheck. We put it in, and you're saying we were suckers.
When you, as a host, tells someone you're interviewing to shut up, that's going to raise a red flag.
That guy needed a tall glass of shut up juice.
If President Obama's doing the wrong thing, I'm not going to tell you that he's doing the right thing so I can, quote, support him.
He says to me, "You won't believe the meeting that I just had."
The head of MSNBC talked to me.
And they want him off the air.
Cenk took an incredible risk.
We're supposed to challenge the government. That's the role of the media. The Democrats and the Republicans are here to screw you. And who on the air is saying it?
I wouldn't have done what he did.
That if I'm going to be a talk show host, I should be the biggest talk show host in the country. I don't think anyone else does it better. I don't think anyone's even close.
Before you know it, I'll be back on your TV doing a national show. I guarantee it.
Welcome to our trash revolution.
All right, back on the Young Turks special coverage of tanks for nothing, military parade, and Donald Trump birthday combined. Donald Trump's 79. The United States Army is 250 years old. It is 1 year older than the country. Next year we'll be celebrating 250-year anniversary of America, but the Continental Army was formed on June 14th, 1775, and then of course, you'll never guess what date we declared independence. Oh, right, July 4th, 1776. So that's why it's 250 years. I'm really good at math. I did it in my head, just like Ronnie Chang. All right, so you saw there that obviously our coverage is hosted by myself and Ben Cohen. And joining us now is Colonel Larry Wilkerson. The last time he was in a government position, we started a giant war. But he has made amends for that in many, many, many ways. And so he was, of course, Chief of Staff for Secretary of State Colin Powell. And he's got too long a resume to read otherwise. Colonel Wilkerson, good to join us again. We appreciate you.
Good to be with you, especially now.
Yep. So, all right, let me start out really broad, and then we'll pull up the parade on the side here as we talk. So, what's your take on the current military situation that we're in? And when I say that, I mean the enormous Pentagon budget now pushing up to $1 trillion. Us now seemingly at least somewhat involved, if not a lot involved, in yet another war in the Middle East. And a lot of the neocons from back in your day wanted this war with Iran for a long, long time. So, especially given your experience in the government, where do you think we stand today? Have we fixed anything, or are we almost worse off than we were during that Bush-Cheney era?
I think we're in deep trouble. I think we're in profound trouble, both domestically and internationally. I think we're becoming a pariah on the world scene, just as, of course, Israel is. And I don't buy this business and never have. I like John Mearsheimer. I like Steve Walt. I taught their paper to my classes at the George Washington University and also at William & Mary. But I don't think we are in AIPAC's hands, the Congress is and others who are bought and paid for. But Israel's acting for us. They're our attack dog. Lindsey Graham said it truthfully on the floor of the Senate when he said, if they weren't doing it, we'd have to be doing it. Meaning, if they weren't killing the Palestinians at a ferocious rate, we'd be doing it. I think that's what is the truth. I think Israel is our attack dog in the Levant. And I think we're now paying and are going to pay a serious price in the days to come for that posture.
Yeah. I agree and disagree, to be honest. I think there's no reason for Americans to needlessly slaughter Palestinians. I think Israel is actually leading, but that's okay. Either way, it's the same result. And so this Iran war, I've got to ask you at least one more question about it. Just like back in the Bush-Cheney era, when we were being told by the neocons, "Oh, don't worry, it'll be quick and easy, and we'll be greeted as liberators." I'm now seeing some of the same talking points. Oh no, the Iranian people want to be bombed because they'd love to get rid of their own government that's oppressive, etc. And this is for self-defense, and we will get peace through war. So, are you getting a sense of deja vu here? And how bad do you think this will be? Do you think that maybe we can end this, in some short period of time, or is it going to drag out and be as disastrous as Iraq?
Well, I can't let you get away with that comment without a riposte.
Okay.
You disagreed with me. There are people, I know them, I've met them, I've talked with them in our government and behind our government, and they're the more important ones, who are so angry still with Iran for having thrown out the Shah and spent time and effort to keep American hostages for 444 days and ruin a president of the United States, et cetera, that they have wanted since that moment to take on Iran. And now they're using Israel to do it. Then Trump can deny it all day long. He is aiding and abetting this process. As to the war itself, I think we're looking at a possible regional conflict. And Vladimir Putin in his phone call probably hinted at that, but the press didn't carry any of that, of course. It was an inane phone call, according to the New York Times and others in the way they reported it. But I can imagine that Vladimir Putin, as circumspect and prudent that he is, probably ripped Trump a new rear end. And rightfully so, in my view, because he has postulated, he's postured, he's done everything he possibly could. And so is Xi Jinping in a more low-key way, that this is not good. This is not something that should be happening. And I think we're going to look at a possible conflagration all across Southwest Asia. And the Iranians are going to start it now. Apparently, they have said categorically that they are going to hit other targets, meaning us. And Marco Rubio's statement that we had nothing to do with it was a flagrant lie, and they know that. And I think they're going to take him up on that. I think they're going to hit other U.S. assets in the region. And just so your listeners know, those assets are fundamentally unprotected. They are not combat troops. The 50,000 or so that are there at Al Udeid and Qatar, there's no air defense. There's no security other than just base fence security. At Khalid in Saudi Arabia, it's much the same. It's a naval headquarters in Bahrain. It's got just it's just got the people there, the indigenous people, to protect it. These are not fighting soldiers and Marines, as it were. So you've got a really vulnerable population. If Iran really does this, even if we stop a lot of what comes in with aircraft out of Al Udeid, they're still going to produce a lot of casualties, which is why I think we did a partial non-combatant evacuation operation anyway. We moved a lot of civilians out. But this is not good.
So I'm going to let Ben in here in a second, but Larry, I got to follow up on that real quick on two fronts. One, you mentioned the people behind the scenes that we don't see who push for things. The right wing has a theory about a deep state, et cetera. I never know who the people behind the people are. So I'm curious about that and how they're so old, they haven't let 1979 go. That's insane. But on top of that, then when you said the second part, I've got to ask about that too, because it seemed to me, and we talked about this on the Young Turks on Friday, that, well, Israel's very well protected. They've got Iron Dome, they've got us, they've got Jordan knocking down missiles, right? But I said the same thing you did, but we are not protected in the Middle East. We're sitting ducks. And so we appear to be a very, well, in the words of Don Rumsfeld, we're a target-rich environment, right?
Yeah. Yes.
And so is it almost a plan for the American soldiers who are left exposed to get hit and killed, so it drags America into the war?
That's part of it. That's a big part of it. I'm convinced it is. I think we want to go there, and we need the right excuse to do it, and we're posturing ourselves right now to get that right excuse. And if Iran gives it to us, we go. And let me tell you, this is not going to be easy. You do not conquer a nation of 90 million people, 52% of whom are Persian and very homogeneous. We have steeled them now. In my entire time in government, one of the positive things about our relationship with Iran that the Iranian people refused to put aside was they liked us, especially those under 50. And those under 30, it was almost universal that they liked us. They liked what we stood for. They liked who we were. They visited with us. We visited with them. Exchanges with their universities and so forth, even though we were having this animosity all the time. It wasn't between the Iranian people and the American people. Now they are steeled in their anger and their hatred for the empire. And that's what bombs do. That's what rockets do. That's what killing people in their bedrooms with their women and children around them. That's what that does. We now have a 90 million country that's so much bigger than Iraq, is 4 or 5 times bigger than Iraq, and it's got mountains. I had to war plan for that place when the Soviets might have come out of Afghanistan down to Chabahar and Bandar Abbas at the southern end of the Gulf. I had to do war planning at Pacific Command for that time. That is rough terrain. We will lose our butts in Iran if we try to do something really damaging. And the only thing that will ensure their nuclear program is stopped cold is either a nuclear weapon, and I know there's a nuclear option in General Cirillo's briefing to Donald Trump, and an invasion. You could do it with a nuclear weapon or two, or you could do it with an invasion. And if either way, it's disaster in my view.
I'm sorry, I just got to follow up real quick. You mean to take out their nuclear sites effectively, you've got to either have ground troops or they're buried so deep in the mountain you have to nuke it?
Yes, that's exactly.
Jesus Christ. Okay, all right, Ben.
Well, what do I think about this? My understanding is that we had a nuclear arms treaty with Iran, and the first time around, Trump pulled out of it. So what does he expect, or what did we expect? I mean, you have a treaty, one party pulls out, you expect the other part to still abide by the treaty? I mean, it seemed like we had the problem dealt with.
Ben, that's one of the significant problems that we learned when Powell was Secretary of State. We can't pass treaties anymore. We had a list of treaties that was an arm long, beginning with the Law of the Sea Treaty, which almost every American that we consulted with wanted to see passed, but it takes a 2/3 majority. The Senate Foreign Relations Committee refused to bring any treaty up in the Congress. That was part of the problem with that. It was not a treaty binding under international law and under our Constitution. The Constitution says a treaty is binding law, domestically as well as internationally. We won't pass them. That's what made that agreement so vulnerable, because it could be negated by the next president, which, as you said, was.
Yeah.
We can't get the Senate to do a 2/3 majority. It's nonsense. We're not a functioning country anymore.
Yeah. So, Larry, let's get back to who pushes for these wars, right? So, to me, in terms of the giant military budget, that's kind of obvious. Defense contractors push for it, right? And I see a revolving door where generals retire, become defense contractor consultants, get paid handsomely, wind up with a really nice house in McLean, Virginia, and since they got millions and knew that the way to get hired was to give Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, et cetera, billions before they retired, right? So that one I think is largely clear. It's driven by one giant, very powerful lobby who has a direct financial interest in us wasting our money on their products, right? But when it comes to war, I mean, to your point, and to now the whole country's seeing it, and it's such an interesting way. And Ben went on Tucker Carlson's show, and I want to get him in to talk about that in a second. And the reason I bring that up is that Tucker Carlson just yesterday said Donald Trump is complicit in this war, and that we should not be going in. And an enormous percentage of MAGA agrees with Tucker Carlson, right? And Marjorie Taylor Greene said something similar to that effect on our show. And then Charlie Kirk even. So you have the right wing, the left wing has always been anti-war, the middle wing, everybody. And the wars are disastrous. I mean, we've now had how many experiences where we wasted trillions of dollars and got no good result. So, but a handful of people managed to push us into these wars every time. So who are those handful of people, and what did they gain from these wars?
It's a group that encompasses everything from 30-year-olds to 80-year-olds. And it has a long memory, and it has an agenda that is spelled out best in terms of dollars. And you've just cited how those dollars are used sometimes. I'm convinced now we have an entirely new echelon in this group too. It's the same group. It's been around since the 30s. It's been around since FDR, actually before that. But it's Smedley Butler actually had to testify to the US Congress about some of this group. But it is a group that feels like its money, its power, indeed its very life, collectively speaking, is involved with the empire's imperial edict. And the edict is to control the world. I'm not just being lightheaded here. It is to control the world. That's why we're having so much trouble right now with the war in Ukraine and the pursuit thereof and the Europeans' devotion to it. Why are they devoted to a war that we started, and we did, we started the Ukraine war, that is clearly between Washington and Moscow, and NATO as an adjunct, using Ukraine's blood and treasure and guts as a proxy for that? That is all a part of this warp and woof of keeping the imperial writ solid, as one person put it to me in Colin Powell's office and to him. Anything that stirs at the bottom of the mountain, which we're on the top of and controlling, we will smash it with our military or sanctions or both. That's their attitude. But it is generated out of their lust for power and money. And we've had them. We've had them throughout our national history. We just haven't had them in positions of power like they are today. And this is very scary, because Donald Trump does not know any of this. Donald Trump does not read. He does not know history. He has no idea of the forces that his MAGA group is marshaling underneath, both domestically and foreign policy-wise. He has no idea. He's a tool of it, too. A clownish tool.
So, Colonel Wilkerson, when you were the chief of staff for Secretary Powell, did you have interactions with this group? Who was
the number 3 man in the State Department was a leader in it, John Bolton.
Yeah, so talk to me about that. So, how is what is this group? How is John Bolton a part of it? How do they exercise power?
They exercise power a number of ways. They exercise it by being anonymous. Who are the billionaires behind this? You can name a few. You can name Peter Thiel. You can name the richest man in the world, Elon Musk, who's having a problem with it right now, apparently. You can name a few others, but there are many, many more behind them. Just as there were many, many more behind the people who tried to push FDR out in the 30s and even all the way up to World War II. These people don't go away. You call them fascists in other countries. We don't like that term, but that is a good term to describe them. They're always with us. They've always been with us. Today, they're gaining maximum power because they have infiltrated a lot of the bureaucracy and a lot of the backup for the bureaucracy. And they're in other places too, like business. You shift money over from Lockheed Martin to Anduril and Palantir, for example, in order, as Pete Hegseth says, to get technology that is actually built into a weapon system that's useful before it atrophies with time's passage. And you create a whole new world of these people. And you get a lot. Look at the nuclear industry right now. There's no one from the Manhattan Project, no one anymore in the nuclear industry. What you have is a bunch of 40 and 45 and 50-year-olds who are not seized of the Cold War attitude about the danger of nuclear weapons, who right now are beavering away with billions of dollars at their disposal in the labs and elsewhere to build new and more sophisticated nuclear weapons so we can strike first and ride out anything that comes back at us. That's happening right now. Totally ignorant of that are the American people. I'm not sure that they would do anything if they knew about it. But we're building out right now, $2 trillion is going to be spent on a whole new family of nuclear weapons. And the purpose of this ultimately is to achieve a first strike capability and therefore annihilate our enemies who are nuclear weapon states and live through the whole thing ourselves. And people say, you're crazy, Larry, you're crazy. No, I'm not. Go out to Los Alamos, go out to Sandia Labs and check it out. These people are proud of what they're doing because they're technicians, they're engineers, they're young and they're aggressive and they're moving out just the same way the Manhattan Project did, only without the kind of guidance that they had from the leadership at the top.
Well, Larry, since you were the chief of staff for the Secretary of State when we launched the Iraq War, I'm afraid that your expertise frightens me. So because you do tell a frightening story here. So Ben, on the what Larry mentioned there about the fight back. So some on the left say we have no allies on the right; they'll just follow whatever Trump says, and they like war and they'll be fine, etc. But you've gone and talked to the right wing from time to time. Is there a genuine anti-war movement there? And can the American people, right and left, unite to try to push back against the forces that Larry's talking about?
Yeah, I think if we start trying to focus on the things we agree on instead of focusing on the things that we don't agree on, we can make some headway. Libertarians and the Cato organization have been opposed to the US trying to control the entire world, since I got involved in this, which is nigh on half a century now. I mean, for Larry, it's longer than that, I'm sure. I think people hate war. I think the American people hate war. I think people all over the world hate war. And the US wars, as Larry pointed out really well, is about the US strategy, which is written in black and white, of hegemony. And it's essentially saying that the policy of the US is that we must be king of the hill. And if any other country starts to develop militarily or economically, we are to regard them as an enemy, because we insist on the world being run and controlled by the United States. And it's really interesting when you take a look and see how the US ranks versus other countries on scales related to quality of life, healthcare, education, wealth disparity, poverty. Reading scores, we don't rank real high. I mean, US is not number one, except when you get down to weapons exports and military spending.
Yeah.
That's who we are.
So I want to show some of those numbers in a second. Don't put them up yet, Marissa, but because I want to have the audience try to guess where we are with it. And then we're going to put it up as a graphic, what Ben was referring to. And then I'm going to get to the cost of the wars and then ask Larry a question. So we're number one, for obviously, in per capita GPD. So we're the richest country in the world, is the easy way of putting it. Okay, so then you would think, like, for example, on happiness and well-being, if we're number one, maybe Sweden, ekes us out and we're number 3 or something like that. No, we're number 25 on happiness and well-being, right? Because we're not serving the American people, we're serving these elite group of folks, the corporations, etc. How about standard of living? Standard of living, I mean, you got to be number one. We're the richest country in the world. Nope, number 20. Number 20 in the world. And why is that? Because we're number 61 on income inequality. And so now, Marissa, let's put it up. There you go, thank you. Perfect, so you see, I mean, just exactly as Ben described, it's a disaster. Number 46 on maternal mortality. Our moms are dying giving birth. Even though we're the richest country in the world, we're number 46 on that. That is insane. And so number 43 on environmental performance. Reading, come on guys, richest country in the world, we should be number 1. We're number 13 on reading. Number 11 on access to healthcare, but number 1 on incarcerated citizens, number 1 on military weapon exports, and number 1 on military spending. So this is not a healthy way to run a democracy. Now, later, we're going to show you some of the things that we sacrificed in order to spend that money on the military. But first, as I promised, I want to tell you how much each of the wars cost, because this is really interesting. So obviously, we're going to do it based on inflation-adjusted numbers. So the Revolutionary War, the one that gave us freedom and a country in the first place, obviously, and since it formed America, most important war we were in, a meager $2.4 billion. For just $2.4 billion, we got America, okay? And so, we got the muskets and the rifles, and I understand, of course, things cost less back then, and we had a good number of deaths, 25 to 70,000 deaths, right? And 17,000 from disease. And that's why, by the way, George Washington mandated the smallpox vaccine for his troops. Anyways, Civil War, $96.5 billion. That's understandable because we had 620,000 deaths. That's the most deaths we've ever had in any war in American history. And then World War I starts to get more expensive because of the equipment. Understandable, $334 billion in today's dollars. And obviously in that war, not just us, but the world loses 9 to 11 million people. I mean, think about that, Jesus, man. We lost about 10 million people for no reason, so that rich men could fight over, where they draw the lines on a map and feel more powerful. But if you thought that was bad, look at World War II. Now that comes in second. How could it come in second? It was World War II, but it does, and you'll see why in a second. $4.1 trillion. And there are obviously overall 70 to 85 million deaths. Lots of wonderful Americans who unfortunately died there. And that was obviously a just war in so many ways. And by the way, on that one, to Larry's earlier point, we certainly have massive disagreements with Russia in many things, and I'm certainly not happy about their invasion of Ukraine. But the Russians did lose 27 million people fighting back the Nazis. 27 million. So an enormous cost there. Korean War is 389 billion. 4 to 5 million people were lost in that war. Vietnam War, even more expensive, 843 billion in today's dollars. Lots of equipment going there, and 2.5 to 3.5 million died, and 58,000 US troops passed away, and over 1 million Vietnamese fighters and millions of civilians. So that was, of course, a disaster that a lot of us lived through, not me, but you guys did. And protested too, and a wonderful anti-war movement was born out of that. But now, finally, Gulf War, 116 billion because it was a limited operation. And by the way, George H.W. Bush and at the time Secretary of Defense Dick Cheney were right to not go into Iraq proper. They were right to only do Kuwait. Unfortunately, they did not learn that lesson. And of course, we get to the #1 war of all time. The global war on terror has now cost us $8 trillion, twice what World War II cost. 8 trillion, over 900,000 people killed, etc. All right, now, Larry, before we let you go, obviously you were involved in the global war on terror. A lot of numbers about how many Iraqi civilians died there, hard to tell. Looking back on it, I'm going to ask an interesting question. Is there any way that we could have prevented it? I mean, just a mass casualty event, and it cost us $8 trillion overall, Iraq, Afghanistan, and the rest. Could we have prevented it? Is there any lessons we could learn there to apply to what's happening in Iran today?
Absolutely, we could have prevented it. We could have listened to 2.5 million people in the largest war protest in human history, as far as I know, in London, which I was in the middle of while it was happening, and had no effect. But if we'd listened to those people, if we'd stopped the effort to unseat Saddam Hussein, if we just hadn't gone there, even George W. Bush said it in his memoirs. He said, had I known there were no WMD, he's the only one who's been contrite to that extent. Had I known there were no WMD, I would never have ordered the war. He says that in his book. Yes, of course we could have not done that war, but we would have had a circumstance in the Levant, in Southwest Asia, that would have been absolutely intolerable to this group of people that I'm telling you about is running the empire. Utterly intolerable to them because they had a plan. The plan went awry in Iran or in Iraq. They were going to take Iraq, then they were going to move into Syria, then they were going to move into Iran, and it was going to be a clean sweep, and that's exactly what they called it too. They were going to eliminate all the enemies that we felt we had in Southwest Asia, and I'll tell you something else. When it came down to it, they were going to eliminate Saudi Arabia.
Oh, I had not heard that one before.
You don't like people who keep telling you what to do because they charge you so much for their oil. That's been in the back of some of these people's mind all along. Prince Bandar sensed that when he was their ambassador here in Washington, but he laughed it off. Bandar Bush, they called him, because he was such a friend of Barbara and George. But he was a savvy guy, typical Saudi. He'd bribe you with $1 billion at the drop of a pen, and did, the Prime Minister of England. If you know anything about the aircraft sales to South Africa, he probably gave Tony Blair at least half of that and kept the other half for himself. So that's the way they do business, though. I mean, he'd tell you that. If he was sitting right here, he'd tell you, what's wrong with that? That's the way you do business. You grease the pan, and then, and when we grease the pan, we really grease it because we have lots of money. We don't like that. Some of the people in the empire here don't like that. We would like to cast the Saudis aside if we could. And if they didn't have lots of oil, we would have already done it. but we find it difficult to do it because they do have that order.
Yeah. So as we watch this military parade go by, and you tell us about the secret forces that are trying to, run the empire, and how many wars are going to start to run the empire, it is kind of a haunting scene. So, Colonel Larry Wilkerson, thank you so much for joining us and giving us insight into this. And that was very informative. When we come back, we're going to talk more about the parade itself. And we're going to have another military expert join us to tell us more about what's happening in military spending recently. And then we'll get back to what Ben was referring to, which is what are we sacrificing in order to feed this empire that Colonel Wilkerson was talking about. All right, we'll be right back.
Magic. It's showtime. And say 45 minutes. I'm hosting today. Now I know what you're thinking, JR, your face is already perfect, but you know what? I still need to apply some makeup. I went through this process, right? A few years ago, when I realized that I was gonna have to wear makeup on the show. I had to go through like finding out what my undertones were. You guys know what those are? I got my MAC Cosmetics. It says SPF 15 foundation, broad spectrum. But apparently what I have is red undertones, and I think pores are not supposed to be seen. I need all these things to be confirmed for me. These sponge things don't work for me. You gotta use your hands. This I did. That's how the magic really happens. So we're gonna go through a tutorial how to make the magic happen from beautiful to beautifuler. Let's go. I've already been moisturized. That's the first thing. But moisturization already happened. We go raw. All hands. Pick up a couple streaks. This is the guy way of putting on makeup. We got dots. There's some shiny points that generally happen. First of all, here we go. You dust here. I'm putting way too much, but you dust. Oh, get the excess off. You don't want chunky powder. There's like a T-zone, I think, right? Mine is a double T-zone. Because I went middle and another cross. Make sure your nose isn't all shiny. People get on you for it. They'll say, that's not a good point you made on there, JR. Your nose is shiny. You guys are picky like that sometimes. I think that's about it, fellas and ladies. See you guys next time. Bitsies.
So am I to understand that you men completed your training on your own?
That's the fact, Jack! That's the fact, Jack!
All right, back on the Young Turks coverage of the 250th birthday, I suppose, anniversary of the United States Army, the military parade that accompanies it, brought to you by Donald Trump on his 79th birthday. And now joining us is Christian Sorensen. He's was with the U.S. Air Force, and he's one of the most foremost experts on studying military contracting, and that is certainly very relevant here. So, Christian, thank you for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no problem. So, as we look at the parade, and we'll pull it back up here, we've seen a lot of military equipment go by, and we explained to the audience. It ranges from Revolutionary War all the way through the future army, Golden Dome, and other pieces of nonsense. Tell us about some of what we're seeing. When we look at the equipment from the past, I just read the numbers on how much different wars cost and how the global war on terror costs so much more than World War I, Vietnam, and in fact twice as much as World War II, right? Mm-hmm. Is it mainly the equipment that costs more? What is it that costs more?
So there's a lot there. At the absolute base of it, the U.S. military itself has no longer any real industrial capacity to produce a weapon of war, or to produce any product or any technology that really has to do with war. Pretty much all of that, since the Vietnam War gradually has been shifted into corporate hands. So it's the corporations together that are calling the shots. They are the ones who set the price. They are the ones who control the two parties through lobbying and campaign finance and revolving door, like you talked about. And so that's just the baseline. But the other thing is the war industry itself, the corporations that develop, market, and sell all this technology, they don't just sell some of which we see today, the rotary aircraft, the helicopters, the tanks, and the bombs and the missiles, what we kind of usually think about when it comes to war and preparations for war. They also sell everything else that you could possibly imagine that has to do with fighting or that has to do with preparations for fight. So that includes operating some of the bases, home and overseas. That's stuff that the troops used to do. The private used to, mow the lawn and take out the trash. That's pretty much now almost all in corporate hands at some of the larger bases. The corporations make espionage software. They do physical security at bases. They sell now these days artificial intelligence. You were talking earlier on the program about nuclear weapons. That is all in corporate hands, and on and on. So the system itself is all corporate, and the corporations are running the show, and that's sort of where a lot of the cost comes from. Not to mention what they sell after they get you on the hook. They don't just sell the product, they sell and they bill the military for everything from assembly to inspection to packaging to delivery to maintenance, upgrades, monitoring the actual product. It's all billable activities. So that's sort of the key to why, as your graphic showed, the wars these days, the nonstop wars, cost so much.
Well, yeah. Now the weapon systems that are being purchased are kind of so complex that the services themselves are not able to repair them. I mean, my understanding is that the F-35 needs to be flown back to Texas for the guy who built it, the contractor that built it, to repair it.
Yes, so the F-35 is made. The prime contractor on the F-35 is Lockheed Martin, and the main assembly plant is in Fort Worth, Texas. Correct. But the Lockheed Martin also has a list of subcontractors, so other corporations that are involved in making the weapon of war. And so this gets to what another problem with the system these days is that the military it doesn't just purchase the land vehicle or the aircraft or the submarine or whatever. Those are called, the platform. It doesn't just purchase the platform. It purchases many other products and categories of service that we talked about that go on the platform. So if you have like, a Black Hawk helicopter, for example, that when we see that in the parade today, you have the helicopter itself, which is made by Lockheed Martin's subsidiary Sikorsky. So you have that. Then you have a different corporation that will sell the weaponry, a different corporation that sells the information technology, a different corporation on vision and cameras and equipment and all that, a different one for the communication gear, and on and on and on and on. And so you mentioned Lockheed Martin F-35 Joint Strike Fighter. A big key to that is, yes, Lockheed Martin, the corporation itself, is in charge of a lot of the maintenance. Lockheed Martin also sells the maintenance sort of monitoring system. And that itself is plagued with some problems, as the aircraft is notoriously plagued with some problems. And so, yeah, another problem with the F-35 is that Lockheed Martin, when inking the contract early on with the representatives in the Pentagon, very wisely from a business perspective, but very horribly from a quote unquote national security perspective, made sure that it was in charge of a lot of the data that the aircraft collects and a lot of the data that has to do with maintenance and sustainment. So you have the F-35 these days that doesn't keep up with minimum maintenance standards because of lack of spare parts and lack of the technical data, which the corporation pretty much owns and has a lock on and is very hesitant to release because that would cut into their bottom line.
So I want to ask you about the two things you mentioned there, the F-35, and then actually as it relates to the technology and how they kind of lord that over us, the corporate defense contractors do. But as we're watching this parade, two thoughts popped into my head. One, it was earlier, I believe we were looking at the Bradley fighting vehicles. We told you there's 28 of them in the parade. There's some Abrams tanks as well, but I think there was the Bradley fighting vehicles that were going by earlier. And you'll see the helicopters in there as well. We told you about the Apaches and the Black Hawk helicopters. And then guys, is to Colonel Wilkerson's point earlier. So before I get back to the F-35, Ben, as I look at this parade, now there's a drone in the air. And those drones, by the way, could change war fighting completely, which I want to come back to with Christian in a little bit as well. But as I saw the military marching through the streets of Washington, Ben, especially with what Larry said in the last segment, it felt a little haunting, like they're almost getting us ready for an internal occupation.
Yeah, it does look kind of ugly in that respect when you put it together with what's going on now in Los Angeles and Trump calling out the military on American citizens that are exercising their right to protest. Yeah, that has me pretty scared. I mean, that's the scariest thing.
Yeah, because it's one thing when he had planned to do this parade. Oh, it's my birthday, and I want to have some toys and some soldiers, and maybe, other circus, a clown. I don't know what he wanted for his birthday, right? But now when you have actual not only National Guard but Marines in the streets of LA, well, now this just got real. That's not a parade, that's the actual military in the streets of American cities. And this wasn't what America was supposed to be. So Christian, then back to you on the F-35. I mean, there's a reason why we're seeing this. Is this the Bradley fighting vehicle?
I can't see, that looks like, it depends on how big from my angle, it looks like it could be, yeah. It's either the Bradley or it's the Bradley. The Paladin, so Bradley is made by BAE Systems. And the Paladin howitzer, which has a bigger, basically artillery on the front. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, so that's the Bradley fighting vehicle right there.
Yeah.
I mean, it amazed me that they're actually putting the Bradley in this parade, because the Bradley is kind of like the poster child for the corrupted acquisition and testing process. I mean, it was so sick that a book was written on it called The Pentagon Wars. It was made into a movie with Kelsey Grammer that's called a black comedy. I mean, I thought it was a tragedy. I mean, what they pointed out was that, standard operating procedure was to fudge the tests. I mean, this was a vehicle that was designed to transport troops and to protect them, and the damn thing was made out of aluminum. And the guy who had formerly been in charge of doing the testing and development refused to test it with live fire. And then another guy came in and said, "That's crazy. Of course we should test it with live fire." They tested it with live fire, and it was clear that if there was live fire, whoever was in it would have died. But that guy who uncovered all the problems, he didn't get promoted, and the guy who created the problems did.
Yeah, I mean, that goes to the point that Larry was making, Ben's making, Christian's making, which is that the point here isn't to have the world's greatest military, and it's certainly not to protect and defend the homeland. It's to do aggressive imperial wars, and protecting the troops is one of the last priorities. It's a boondoggle of how much can you spend, because the money you spend goes directly to these private corporation defense contractors. That's why, if you remember, in the beginning of the Iraq War, all of our vehicles were getting blown up, and they were not properly protected, and the IEDs were getting our soldiers killed and our troops killed more than anything else was. And then Rumsfeld arrogantly went to Iraq and said, well, you go to fight with the army you have, not the one you wish you had, right? Well, yeah, that's because you guys wasted all of the money on purpose on junk that doesn't work and didn't even think to protect the troops. And so, all right, speaking of wasting money, that leads us perfectly back to the F-35. How much money have we spent as US taxpayers on the F-35?
Oh, to date, that's very difficult. I wouldn't have that figure. And I actually would challenge anyone in the Pentagon to come up with that figure. The overall estimated program cost for the F-35 is upwards of $1.6 trillion. But I don't know how much of that has been allocated, and I don't know how much of that is still sort of in the works. But I will say this: I will say that there are two sort of phases of acquisition when it comes to a major weapons acquisition program, whether it's an aircraft, a sub, an aircraft carrier, whatever. For the F-35, so then those two phases are initial production and full rate production. And so the F-35 for many years was in initial production. And that basically says, all right, we're not going to, commit to buying full speed at this stage. And the corporation gradually applies pressure through a variety of ways, some of which Larry talked about. And the Pentagon finally said, all right, we're gonna switch to from slow rate initial production to full rate production. And the justification of that was not made public, contrary to basically standard operating procedure. Usually it's not a classified document. It's usually wide in the open. You can find it. If you're a journalist, you can get it. If you are in the Pentagon, you can issue it to the public. And so we don't know what the justification was to take an aircraft that has flaw after flaw after flaw and upgrade it to, we'll go full steam in. We're all in on this aircraft. So it's just another thing where classification is overused and used not just to protect confidential, secret, top secret, but it's also there to protect corporate greed, fraud, waste, and abuse, et cetera.
Yeah, we're seeing these robots that are part of the modern warfare, apparently, Do you know what these are, Christian, out of curiosity?
No, that looks like something that maybe Boston Dynamics would have done, but I'm not up on that at all.
The music obviously is coming from the parade.
Let's hope those dogs are not autonomous.
Yeah, which is a whole nother problem. So it does not even get into that problem. So Christian, 1.6 trillion, I've seen the number 1.7 trillion for the F-35. Now, I'm not a military expert at all in terms of the equipment. So did the F-35 at least turn out to be a great plane? Do we use it all the time? It hasn't been useful?
No, so give credit where credit's due. One of the things that the F-35 actually does somewhat well is it's basically a flying computer. It's very good at networking with other aircraft that are in the air and sort of seeing what's out there. So credit where credit's due. What it is not good at is some of the major things that the corporation, when it was initially pitching this aircraft, marketed as having. So for example, it was marketed as a stealth aircraft, but to be stealth, you have to have a very low signature when other countries are looking for you on the radar. And so one of the things you do is put on a highly classified mixture on the aircraft's outer layer, and this is sort of a quote unquote stealth coating. Well, there's some reporting on that where it's like it's not as stealth as it was marketed as. Also, you can't be stealth if you have a lot of weaponry on the hanging under the aircraft wings. And so the corporation said, all right, we'll carry it inside. But the engine on the F-35 is so big that it can't carry a lot of the weaponry on the inside. So later on, the Pentagon was like, all right, we'll carry it on the outside. We'll carry the bombs and the missiles and everything on the outside. Well, then that eliminates a lot of your stealth ability. So that's another problem. It also has a General Dynamics rotary cannon on the front of a couple of different variants of the aircraft. And the cannon has reportedly blown up at various times on its own, shot itself, basically had problems with that. It also has a Raytheon Pratt & Whitney engine, and the engine has had serious problems with vibrations. And the vibrations, if they get bad enough, can cause basically catastrophic failure of the aircraft. And as we mentioned earlier, it doesn't have enough spare parts, and so there's trouble with maintenance, and it does not meet, I believe to this day, at least as of last season when I checked last on the maintenance standards, it doesn't meet minimum US military maintenance standards because of lack of spare parts and not enough access to the corporate data. So no, it's not.
And my understanding is that the thing is not mission capable at least 50% of the time.
I saw a number. There's a really good reporter for Bloomberg, I believe, called Anthony Capaccio. I'm probably bungling his last name, but he's done really good work on the F-35 reporting for Bloomberg. And I believe the number he cited was even lower than 50%. It was something like high 30s, mid 40s. So yeah, and so the Pentagon, the people who are left in the high ranks of the Pentagon who, the few that actually have, a soul left are, justifiably furious. But one of the problems with the revolving door is there's so many political appointees from the corrupt two-party system there, they don't care. And then there's the actual revolving door itself where people from industry go into government, go back to industry, go into government. And so they themselves are just looking to profit financially and professionally. So nobody who's actually in a position to change this whole monstrosity is gonna do anything.
Well, and the thing that drives me crazy is I follow what's going on with the F-35, and it's exactly what happened with the F-22, the previous plane. They all go through the same stages. First, it's overpromise in terms of what the thing is capable of doing. Then it's lowball the price, and then it's get it politically engineered so that parts of it are made in every congressional district, and then you can't stop it, despite the fact that it doesn't meet the original performance specifications. It costs way more than it should, and the damn thing is unreliable. So eventually, Congress cuts off the money for it. And that's what they did with the F-22. And the F-35 is just following in the same exact steps. And I hear there's even talk now about cutting production on the F-35. And, based on past performance, it doesn't look like the F-47 is going to be any better. Hey, I was wondering, Christian, is the F-47 the plane that they said we can't tell you how much it's going to cost because it's classified, national security, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I haven't seen any figures for the total cost of the F-47, but it's still in its basically digital design phase at this point. But there are plenty of overpriced and underperforming weapons, like the new Northrop Grumman B-21 bomber, and that's
yeah. I mean, what drives me crazy? Well, there's so many things that drive me crazy. Is that, you could use proven technology on these planes. I mean, you could use stuff that's tried and true. I mean, you'd think in a war environment, you wouldn't want to buy the first model off the line. But that's what they insist on doing because, as you've all said, it's driven by profits.
Yeah, Christian, real quick, I've got to ask you two questions before we let you go. So let's note for the record that it is startling that we could spend $1.6 trillion on a piece of equipment and then not have spare parts on it. Jesus, where'd the money go? I mean, how do you not have money for spare parts if you spent 1.6 trillion and it doesn't work apparently about 60% of the time? I mean, it doesn't get any more boondoggle than this. But I was led to believe that Doge was going to clean up all this waste, fraud, and abuse. Are you suggesting that it hasn't, Christian?
Yes, and many people are suggesting that it hasn't. There's so much money to be made in war, and one of the big reasons is the people who benefit, the 1%, the ruling class, the richest of the rich, are not the ones who sacrifice. It's the working class. It's the 99% who pay all the costs. That's the bottom line.
Yeah. And then finally, you mentioned how we're kind of beholden to these corporations who have the data on some of these pieces of equipment and the technology, et cetera. So we're actually living under corporate military rule in a sense as well. And I saw a report on Golden Dome where they said that they were going to, Elon was planning, if he got the contract, to not only charge us money for Golden Dome, but to make it a subscription service so that we would have to keep paying him monthly. And then I thought, well, what if we don't? Does he then take Golden Dome to China or Russia or somewhere else or whoever's the highest bidder? Is that possible? And what does it mean to do a subscription service for the US military?
I don't know. I haven't heard anything about that. It is though indicative of the sort of the psychosis or the pathology of the ruling class and how money is the ultimate goal and they will do anything in order to keep the game going, even if it's life or death.
Well, they should sell it to some country that we're concerned about because it doesn't work.
Well, that's an ironic way to, screw over our enemies. Oh yeah, that you not only take our weapons that don't work, but take our defense contractors and you get bankrupted instead of us. Okay. Yeah. But I don't know that we'll utilize that unique strategy that Ben just came up with. But Christian Sorensen, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. Coming up next, we've got Senator Nina Turner. We've got Richard Ojeda, who's had 24 years in the military, and he's got very strong opinions about how the service members are treated, as opposed to the fat cats at the top that we've been talking about, and more of the parade to show you, and the numbers that Ben was alluding to earlier. What are we sacrificing in order to have this, grotesquely bloated, pork barrel-filled defense industry? All right, we'll be right back.
Indisputable is still the fastest growing news show in America compared to CNN, Fox News, and 30 other networks. We tell the truth on Indisputable because the truth is indisputable. We go places that other news media outlets refuse to go. When there were human rights abuses happening at the Victorville prison, guards and members of the community contacted us.
You, through your investigative reporting, unearthed very troubling allegations about specific forms of abuse and discrimination in the federal prison system.
It really doesn't take much to be a trusted voice. All it takes is to be fearless, report on matters, be an advocate. I called it the bullpen intentionally because it's a place of preparation. We present individuals who may have an opposing view, so we debate. Sometimes we interview individuals because their stories deserve to be heard. A survivor of significant police misconduct and his attorney. We covered this story earlier and to remind you of the horror of one man being shot at damn near 100 times by the police. We take time on this show to showcase the temper tantrums of Karens in the wild. We do this not because we want to see people's emotional outbursts in public, but because these incidents are emblematic of a bigger societal issue taking place across the nation, and it has to be checked.
My friend, my big homie, attorney at law, Benjamin Crop.
I just want to thank you, man. Educated, articulate brothers like yourself speak truth to power. It makes a great difference in changing the landscape in America. So
listen, no matter what you do, don't allow the politics of ideology to evaporate the soul that still exists inside of you. They don't stop, I don't stop. Racism won't stop, I won't stop. Systemic bias won't stop, I won't stop. People still need health care, so I won't stop. People still need criminal justice systems reform, so I won't stop. You won't stop either.
Let us therefore brace ourselves to our duty. So bear ourselves that if the British Empire and its commonwealths last for 1,000 years, men will still say, this was their finest hour.
All right, back on the Young Turks coverage of the Army's 250th birthday, Donald Trump's 79th birthday. You know what? He's actually been around for a good chunk of the country. Good for him for that. And our presidents do keep getting older and older. So maybe we'll bring George Washington back one of these days. I mean, the way we're going. Look. When you were a kid, you wanted to have a birthday party that was spectacular, maybe some GI Joes, some tanks, some planes. Well, Donald Trump is just taking that to a different level, okay? And of course, with your money. Don't get it wrong. So now, Cenk Uygur.
You should have spray painted all the tanks gold for the parade.
Don't give him any ideas, because next year is America's 250th birthday. So he might bring out the golden tanks to match the golden dome and the golden card and the golden dome that he has on top of his head. Anyway,
what about the golden calf?
Yes, that mainly the golden calf, which is actually what's driving all of this, as we've been talking about all day long. So that's a great point, Ben. And obviously joining us, the indomitable Senator Nina Turner. That is the usual reaction she gets.
It's so great to be with both you. I call Ben affectionately Cenk BC, but it's good to be with both of you and the TYT fam.
Yes, wonderful to have you. So, Nina, we've been showing the parade, explaining that it's got the range from the Revolutionary War parade, at least people dressed up as that, and dressed up as World War I, Vietnam, Korean War. Back in New Jersey, we actually, my family lived near the.
First Sergeant Norton, reporting for duty, sir. Ready to commence the ceremony as directed.
I state your name.
I
do solemnly swear. That I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, and that I will obey the orders of the President of the United States and the orders of the officers appointed over me according to regulations and the Uniform Code of Military Justice. So help me God. Congratulations, congratulations. Welcome to the United States Army, and have a great life. Thank you very much. Have a great life. Thank you.
Yeah. So that was Trump swearing in some of the, obviously the very new troops and the soldiers in the US Army. This is not just the militaries. Obviously the Army started the military, but it is specifically the Army's 250th birthday. It started as the Continental Army in 1775, and that's why we're celebrating it today. We would normally be celebrating it anyway, but we would not normally have a military parade like this, which again, to me, harkens back to not great memories of Europe past and some other countries that are more militaristic in nature. I'm proud that we have a strong military, but I'm not proud of the amount of money that we spend on it, and I certainly don't think the military should be in the streets of the United States. And by the way, guys, as I'm going to go to Nina here in a second, I did a tweet about this, a little bit tongue in cheek about, hey, if you're right wing, you're not going to want to watch our coverage because we're going to tell you how much all this stuff costs and what a waste it is, et cetera. But these days, as Ben talked about earlier in the broadcast, a lot of the right wing agrees with us, and they don't want the waste, fraud, and abuse, and they don't want the extra wars, et cetera. But as we look at all that, and I see him swearing in those troops, I put out that tweet, and one of the guys on X was like, "Oh yeah, Grok, isn't it true that actually Biden was planning this in 2023?" And this is not really Trump. Now that actually winds up being true a lot of times. Joe Biden was actually planning the base in Guantanamo, where they're now keeping some, or planning to keep some detainees that are undocumented, et cetera. But in this case, it was kind of hilarious because Grok was like, "Nope, not true." They were planning to have a normal celebration of the 250th birthday of the Army, but there was no military parade planned at all until January 29th of 2025, when Donald Trump ordered that military parade. So this money being wasted today is thanks to Donald Trump. And so, and by the way, I've been promising you that number, so let me just tell you now. This is costing us about $45 million, the US taxpayers, just to put on this parade. Some of that is the cost of redoing some of the streets in Washington, D.C., because the tanks are gonna rip up the streets, and then we're gonna have to fix that. But don't worry, I'm sure there'll be a private contractor that fixes that and gets rich off of that as well, right? And a lot more local police, the military showing up, et cetera, and the costs associated with that. But Nina, I want to turn to domestic politics here in this same context. We've got the No Kings protests happening across the country. We have, unfortunately, not only National Guard, but the Marines, not as a part of a parade, but for real in the streets of Los Angeles, being used against American citizens. I guess my reaction to it, Nina, is, boy, that was quick. He didn't wait this time around for 3-4 years before threatening to bring out the troops in the streets and bringing them out. He went for it right away in the first couple of months here. So what's your take on all of that?
I mean, weaponizing the military against civilians, I mean, it really is a betrayal. President Donald J. Trump is betraying everything that he ran on. And he is stoking the flames here. It's like he's pouring gasoline on a fire. And people, the citizens of this country, in terms of the No Kings Day, it's really good to see people united and come out and push and let this president know that they are not pleased. Ultimately, beyond this, though, we need a full-fledged campaign. That's why I'm so proud that Ben Cohen has launched Up in Arms to continue to remind us, to motivate us to understand that for every dollar that is spent in this way, so what is it, about $134 million or so, when all is said and done between the National Guard and the Marines, for something that is happening in Los Angeles that the local officials and also the governor of that state, put aside your political affiliation, it is a waste of money. The way to show that we love our veterans is to make sure that the unhoused veterans are housed, to make sure that we support veterans when they come back, whether it's post stress, traumatic disorder, whatever they may have, the needs of them and their families. It is not to deploy troops on American soil. That's one. And two, for this parade, which is ridiculous. And you know what, Cenk? Even if we found out that President Biden was going to have more than just a celebration of the 250-year history of the Army, let's say, for example, he was planning a parade, we would be saying the same thing, because we have a commitment to the principles and not to who the politicians are. And it is wrong to spend American tax dollars in this way. And it is wrong to sick military personnel on civilians.
Yeah. So now we mentioned what we could be spending the money on instead. So as you said, the $134 million number in LA, I was like, man, we would love that for fire prevention. That would be a much, much, much better way to spend it in LA. But I'm gonna bring up some of these numbers here. We're gonna look at Trump's budget request to give you a sense of context for how much do we spend on defense versus the other parts of the budget? Because they keep talking about cutting waste from Medicaid and food stamps and now Medicare and closing down Social Security offices. Well, but we asked them to cut spending on defense. They said they would, and then of course they didn't. Instead, they added 150 billion. So let me show you this graphic on a pie chart on how much we spend in the budget. How much of it is the Pentagon? Here, let's take a look at that if we can, Marissa. So look at that chart. You see, it's a solid chunk on Veterans Affairs. You got Department of Homeland Security. And then Health and Human Services is much smaller, education even smaller, HUD smaller. All of the other things that help the American people are those tiny, tiny, tiny slices. The big giant Pac-Man that's eating up the budget is the Pentagon. And again, that's not even including the VA and the Department of Homeland Security, right? So look at how much we spend on defense and for what? Offensive wars in Iraq, Iran now, and so it just totally, utterly wasted. We talked about the 1.6 trillion spent on the F-35 earlier. Let me show you the next chart. So are we spending enough vis-a-vis the rest of the world? Because that context is really important, right? Because maybe we're getting outspent, and that's why we have to spend so much money on defense to catch up. Well, let's look at graphic 6 here, and you begin to see, oh, we're going to spend at least 916 billion, but now estimates are that it might get up to $1 trillion in this budget. The next 9 countries combined, so the rest of the top 10 is at 882 billion, less than us. The rest of the top 10 combined spends less on defense. Almost the rest of the world spends less on defense than we do. And then the rest of the world after the top 10 is 645 billion, so they're not even close to us. So it is stunning how much money we spend on defense instead of helping the American people. I got 2 more for you guys. Let's look at select programs in the US budget. So we've got the Pentagon at $890 billion. K through 12 education. Let's put the next one up, graphic 7. You see the drop off? I mean, look at that drop off. It drops off a cliff. And guys, remember why? Because it's going to private corporations who are taking such a giant chunk of that home in profits. But the second one is K through 12 education all the way down at 80 billion, less than 10%. Less than 10% of what we spend on defense, we spend on our kids. And why? Because they're our kids and they're not a private corporation that profits off of that spending. And then you've got renewable energy at 38 billion if it survives, Head Start at only 12, humanitarian aid at 7 billion, homeless services at 3 billion. I mean, we're constantly talking about, hey, how come we're not doing anything about the homeless? Well, that's because we're spending what? 300 times more on defense when we don't even have a defense issue. Who the hell's attacking us right now? That's why they have to say absurd things like, oh, we're getting invaded by fentanyl from China. What is that? And that's why we have to spend 900 billion? No, we have to spend 900 billion because you're robbing us. One last one, graphic aid here. Global military spending, to give you some perspective on this. So this is not just our military budget, but our allies as well. So when you include our allies, we spend $1.35 trillion. So, well, I mean, the threat must be so large that's why we're spending. No, of course not. China's only at 292 billion, Russia's at 86 billion. See that disparity? We make it seem like China and Russia are about to kill us all, right? They're tiny compared to us in defense spending. Iran, the great menace of Iran, is only 6.8 billion, nowhere near the 1.35 trillion, and North Korea is at 4 billion. So, Nina, Ben, as we look at these numbers, I just, the one thing that rings in my head, we've got concerns about are you using the military here at home and more nefarious purposes, et cetera. But what screams across in those numbers to me, Nina, is this is a robbery. Like this is an unbelievable robbery.
Yeah, I mean, how much more do we need? I mean, that becomes the question. That is a perfect question to ask, given everything that you've laid out. How much more America do we need to destroy the world? How much? Let's go and put a number on it. How much more do we need? And the American people, and that's what I love about. Hopefully, people will watch Ben's Up in Arms video that lays this out very well. We got to start to question this for ourselves. What does it truly mean to be safe in the world? And does all of these weapons make us safer? If we're, Cenk, based on what you just laid out, spending more than the next 9 or 10 countries combined, how much more do we need? We are the only country to have dropped an atomic bomb on another country. We got bases all over the world. How much more do we need? While we can't increase the minimum wage, the Pentagon can't pass a budget, what did they fail? 7 times. They failed an audit 7 times, right, Ben? 7 times, but they get rewarded for not being able to pass an audit. How much more do we need while veterans are overrepresented in the unhoused population? We shouldn't have any unhoused people, but since they sit up there parading down the streets of DC, pretending like they care about veterans, how about let's make sure that there are no unhoused veterans? How much more do we need, America? That's my question.
Yep. All right, guys, let me pause here because we've got JD Vance is going to speak. Trump spoke a little while ago. We're going to play that for you in a minute as well. But let's listen to JD Vance's speech here.
Our soldiers do not rest until they win. Our citizens know that you're standing guard, killing terrorists, crushing our enemies, and keeping America safe. But you're also keeping it strong and proud and mighty and free. This week we remember that we only have.
This is Trump's video leading up to JD Vance.
As President of the United States, let me express my undying gratitude for every soldier here today, for every veteran and their incredible families, and for every patriot who has worn the uniform. Our debt to you is infinite and everlasting. With the grace of God, America will always prevail.
Big footing JD Vance as usual. got to stand up there while Trump takes the spotlight, but go ahead.
Well, let me say to the thousands of Americans who traveled from distant towns and across state lines to be here today, this is your national capital. Welcome to Washington, D.C. We are thrilled to have you. This evening, as we celebrate the 250th anniversary of the United States Army, the oldest branch of the greatest fighting force ever known to man, I want to say to all the soldiers all across our nation's capital and all across the world, happy birthday, soldiers. We're proud of you.
You know, guys, I got to admit, I'm surprised by how much I hate this visual.
And I want to say you represent
civilian,
an unbroken line of greatness,
civilian
of
control
and one of the
in this military context. It's really haunting.
Has told his entire administration. For the vice president,
authoritarian country, he didn't know this was happening in our own country. I would think it was also
uniform and serve this nation are our most precious resource. We must honor them. We must respect them. We must fight for them. And that's exactly what the Trump administration aims to do every single day. And so to our soldiers, we're so proud of you. And let me tell you that the way that we honor and respect you is, number one, we never ask you to go to war unless you absolutely have to. And number two, when we do ask you to go to war, we give you the weapons and the support needed to kick the hell out of the enemy and come back home safely.
How does he say that as we just launched the most unnecessary war in Iran?
In between, and that is a dangerous place to be with a lot of soldiers in the audience. So let me just say a couple of quick additional thoughts. First of all, June the 14th is, of course, the birthday of the Army. It is, of course, the birthday of the President of the United States. And happy birthday, Mr. President.
Why don't you sing for him? I wonder if he's going to pull a Marilyn Monroe.
I would get in trouble if I didn't mention that it's also my wedding anniversary. And so to my lovely wife, I love you, honey. Happy anniversary. And thank you for everything that you do for our country. So without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce the 45th and 47th Commander-in-Chief of the United States military, President Donald J. Trump.
Yeah, so as I was saying earlier, this is a rare time that we see Melania and Donald Trump together. I guess that was another part of his birthday present. He goes to play with the little tanks and the planes, and then his wife actually shows up. But look at this visual. I can't, like, you do this in our military bases. That's what military bases are for, right? You do it in the middle of Washington with a political leader that's supposed to be civilian, and I can't stand it. I think it looks terrible.
Vice President Vance, and thank you to our wonderful First Lady. And above all, thank you to the greatest, fiercest, and bravest fighting force ever to stride the face of this earth, the United States Army. Thank you very much. Because the Army keeps us free, you make us strong, and tonight you have made all Americans very proud. They're watching from all over the world, actually. Made them all very proud. Every other country celebrates their victories. It's about time America did too. That's what we're doing tonight. And watching this magnificent display, our souls are filled with gratitude for every generation of warriors who have worn the uniform all the way back to the very beginning. So to every veteran across our land, and right here in our nation's capital, including 6 recipients of the Congressional Medal of Honor, we love you, we honor you, and we salute your noble service to our flag and to our country. As we celebrate tonight, we also think of the hundreds of thousands of Army soldiers who have made the supreme sacrifice for our nation and selflessly laid down their lives in every war, from the Revolution to the War on Terror. To the Gold Star families with us today, The courage of your heroes is the bedrock on which our entire nation stands. We thank you. Yes, we thank you. Today we commemorate an event that did not just change American history, but changed the history of the entire world. With the creation of America's Army on June 14th, 1775, liberty got its shield and the freedom got its sword. Those first Army patriots in the American Revolution fought against a fearsome enemy and impossible odds, but they were armed with a righteous cause. They were led by an indomitable commander, a truly great man, General George Washington, and they were united by an eternal creed. Their motto was victory or death. Over the past 2.5 centuries, our warriors have shown unrivaled valor on fields of battle around the globe. With the frostbitten feet and bloody fist, they have marched into the flames and fury of combat, charged up mountains, stormed beaches, waded through torrents of gunfire, and leapt into skies thick with smoke and shrapnel. The U.S. Army has driven bayonets into the heart of sinister empires, crushed the ambitions of evil tyrants. Beneath the threads of American tanks, it's done so well, it's done so much, and sent the devil himself flying into full retreat. Time and again, America's enemies have learned that if you threaten the American people, our soldiers are coming for you. Your defeat will be certain, your demise will be final, and your downfall will be total and complete.
That is a very violent speech. We're talking about bloody fists, bayonets in the hearts.
They fight, and they win. And that's
Did
why
we win in Iraq?
No institution in history has entered more names into
Yet
the
Americans
roster of American
killed.
heroes
Not to
than the
mention
U.S. Army, the Congressional Medal of Honor, more than anyone or anything. There was Mad Anthony Wayne, asked by George Washington to lead a daring midnight raid up the cliffs of Stony Point with unloaded muskets and only their bayonets to fight the redcoats. Mad Anthony replied, "Issue the order, sir, and I will storm into hell for you." Then there was the Civil War general, John Corse, shot in the face in combat. He fired off a message to his commander: "I am short a cheekbone and one ear, but I am able to whip the hell out of all of them." He stayed on the front lines, it seemed forever. In World War II, there was the great Creighton Abrams, besieged on all sides by the Nazis at the Battle of the Bulge. He boldly proclaimed, "They've got us surrounded again, the poor bastards." This is the fighting spirit and unyielding force of the U.S. Army. It has never changed, and it will never, ever change, because there is no earthly force more powerful than the brave heart of a U.S. infantryman or an Army Ranger, paratrooper, or Green Beret. They are the best, they are the finest. From Bunker Hill to San Juan Hill, from Gettysburg to Guadalcanal, from Yorktown to Shiloh, and from the trenches of the Argonne to the mountains of Afghanistan, the Army has forged a legacy of unmatched courage, untold sacrifice, and unequaled and undying glory. Our soldiers have poured out their blood by the bucketful on Missionary Ridge and Heartbreak Ridge, on the sands of Sicily, Normandy, and the Philippines, and on the dusty streets of Da Nang, Baghdad, and Fallujah. Thanks to their extraordinary service and devotion, 250 years later, America stands tall, America stands proud, and America stands free. We're the hottest country in the world right now. And our country will soon be greater and stronger than ever before. Down through history, we've been blessed beyond words by this valiant legion of Army warriors and patriots, heroes and legends. And tonight we affirm with unwavering certainty that in the years ahead and in every generation hence, whenever duty calls and whatever danger comes, the American soldier will be there.
Yeah, that's because he keeps sending them into unnecessary wars.
Our warriors will charge into battle. They will plunge into the crucible of fire, and they will seize the crown of victory, because the United States of America will always have the grace of Almighty God and the iron will of the United States Army. Congratulations to everybody. We love our country. We've never done better. Thank you. God bless you. God bless the Army, and God bless America. And now I'd like to ask our great First Lady to join me at the podium. Thank you very much, everybody.
All right. Oh, thank God it's over. Okay. So, man, that was a violent speech. He said, crucible of fire, bloody fists, bayonets in the hearts. Talked about iron will, it reminded me of Iron Cross a little bit. He said, God is on our side, which again, if you don't know the reference, and it's a normal thing to say in other contexts, but, and I don't think that he necessarily meant it this way, but I know that the Germans on their belt buckles had the saying, Gott mit uns. And what that means is God is with us. So every time there is a new bully in the world, he always claims, don't worry, God is with me, and I have bayonets ready to thrust into hearts and fists ready to get bloodied. And so now it's in the streets of Washington, D.C., and some of those folks are now being used in the streets of Los Angeles against our own citizens. Now, on a lighter note, guys, he mentioned the Gold Star families in the beginning of the speech, and of course, he attacked Gold Star families when he was running the first time around, and I wanted everybody to remember that as he pretends to care about them. And then he mentioned feet a couple of times for some reason. And then I thought that's funny because if you remember, he did not go to Vietnam because he claimed he had problems with his ankles, his heels. And he said, when they asked him, this is my favorite part, when they asked him, which heel did you have a problem with? He couldn't remember. So he said, both. And we found out later, of course, that he didn't have any problem with his heels. It was a doctor's note that his dad got for him. And I think if I remember right, he reduced the rent for the doctor's office in order to get that letter written so that someone else could go die in Donald Trump's place. And that's always what happens with these cowards, right? Oh yeah, I'm big and tough and I'm gonna go start wars you don't need in Iraq, Iran, and Vietnam and all these places. Are you gonna go, oh no, oh my heel, oh the left one or the right one, or whichever one the doctor pretended I had a problem with. So look, we've got other guests coming up and there's other facts that we wanna share with you guys. But Nina, before we go, I know you're working on the freedom budget. And from the civil rights era, and as we see this enormous waste of money in Washington, in LA, and with the overall budget, tell us about the freedom budget and what we could be spending it on instead.
Yeah, thank you for that, Cenk. And again, to the people who serve, God bless them. This just makes my heart ache because this is not how you show love. This is a false equivalency that this president is given. He's talking about George Washington. He's talking about every war. Meanwhile, when African Americans fought in those wars, they could not be treated like equals. George Washington was a slaveholder. I have two grandfathers on my maternal and paternal side who fought in World War II, and I have uncles who went to Vietnam. And most of the people who have to go to war our working class people are being sent to go to war. So the things, Jink, that this money could be being spent on is universal health care, increasing the minimum wage, no more wars, making sure that people have a guaranteed income, education, farm parity. Those are the kinds of things. When we think about domestic tranquility, being strong is more than having a strong army or other branches of the military. Being strong means that we have a United States of America that's worth the military protecting. So we need to ask ourselves this question: what type of America is military protecting? One that leaves almost 500,000 people homeless or unhoused on the street. One that has not raised the minimum wage, that is still $7.25. And don't get me started on the sub-minimum wage. Are we protecting an America that forces people to put their insulin on credit cards, or 68,000 people who die every year, or the millions who are uninsured or uninsured? What kind of America do we want our military to protect, Jane? That this relative status and people up there cheering, all of that stuff. Most of those people are working class people. They don't even know what they're clapping for. They just up there clapping. All of this is smoke and mirrors. And if this president really loved this country, he would be using all that chutzpah that he has, all that bravado that he has, to ensure that material conditions change for everybody, but especially the enlisted people of this country. I'm just outdone with it, Cenk. Really.
Yeah.
The freedom budget for all
At
Americans.
the same time, he's looking to cut veterans' benefits, right?
Yes.
Cut the health care that they need because they got wounded in these wars.
That's right.
Yeah. And then every once in a while, you need to have people like Jon Stewart push from the outside just to get help to first responders. And they never, I looked it up a couple of years back, and because all this idea talk of support the troops, support the troops. I said, great, let's look into the budget and see how much are they paying the service members. Incoming service members a couple of years back, it's now a little bit higher, there's yearly salaries, $19,000 a year, $19,000 a year. Where's this? And now it's a little bit above 20,000. Where's the support of the troops? No support for his salaries, no support after the war, only support for giant defense contractors. Yeah, and so look, last quick thing here is we got to keep going. Nina, to your point, there's a guy that's still around that was connected to the civil rights movement. His name is Jesse Jackson. And when I was a young kid in college, I was a Republican, and I went to see Reverend Jackson's speech on my campus, and he begun to move me towards the left. And the story he told was about his dad, who was in World War II, and he said that they were in this pitched battle against the Nazis, and they won, and they captured a whole bunch of Nazis, and then they got on a train back to their base with their prisoners of war, right? And the black,
what you about to say?
The black US soldiers had to sit behind the Nazis. And so things are not what they appear oftentimes. And so that is a heartbreaking story of America. And it doesn't mean that we can't get better and that we haven't gotten better, but it feels oftentimes, Nina, as we take one step forward, we wind up taking 2 steps back. And here we are, 2 days into a new war in the Middle East, and Marines in the streets of LA.
That's right. That's right, Cenk. And I know you got to go to break, and I'm leaving. But Asa Philip Randolph was one of the authors of the Freedom Budget, and I just want to read one quote from him: "Patriotism has no appeal to us. Justice has. Party has no weight with us. Principle has. Loyalty is meaningless. It depends on what one is loyal to." So we really need to redefine as Americans what we are loyal to in the spirit of Asa Philip Randolph, one of the architects of the Freedom Budget and one of the greatest unionists and civil rights leaders of the 20th century. What are we loyal to?
Yeah, and what would be amazing if we were loyal to one another instead of these corporations that have taken over, including the defense industry. All right, Senator Nina Turner, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it. When we come back, we got another fire breather for you guys. Richard Ojeda spent 24 years in the Army. So we'll see if he's celebrating this parade in honor of that Army. He served in about 10% of the Army's history. So we'll talk to him and get his point of view, especially as he's running now for Congress. We'll be right back.
I'm wearing one of our pieces of merchandise. So the funny thing about the Dragon Squad, and that's what our viewers call themselves. That's the name of the group, but every individual chooses their own name. You might have Cincinnati Dragon. You might have Harry Potter Dragon. We have a Grandma Sunshine Dragon is one of those that I remember. These are people that like to have an element of themselves, their lives, what's significant to them reflected as a part of the community. But the concept of the Dragon Squad is just something I threw away as a joke. I was mocking the Proud Boys, these like right-wing groups that come up with a name for themselves that they think is cool, but it's actually really lame. And I thought, off the top of my head, I can come up with something that's still kind of lame, but much cooler. And so I threw out Dragon Squad, and I just moved on with my life. But everybody liked it, and so they kept it going, and so we've embraced it. And I think again, this was during the period of the pandemic. I think it was sort of nice to have a renewed sense of community, a feeling that you're a part of something when everything seems so chaotic. And as a result of that, we've got independent artists online streaming, making beautiful digital art of dragons. We've got, we've released a number of pieces of merchandise that people love sending us photos of them. And then by the way, for me personally, people send me, like you can probably see in the background, like a knitted dragon someone sent me. There's a dragon book they sent me, dragon board games they send me. People have done like custom ironworks, making dragon bottle openers. Like the fans are super invested in diamond art and things like that. And so it's great that they send this stuff. Sometime we're gonna have to set up a wall of all of it. But yeah, it's definitely brought the community a lot closer together. The fact that we were no longer in this big studio, I felt a lot more personally attached to people. It felt very immediate. And I know that I personally needed the connection.
What a sham. I'm just getting warmed up.
It's time to knuckle up.
Welcome back to the live coverage on the Young Turks here of the Tanks for Nothing military parade put on by Donald Trump on his 79th birthday because he apparently needed more toys. Joining myself and Ben Cohen right now is retired Major Richard Ojeda, who he served as a state senator in West Virginia. And he was an educator there, got a lot of bills passed actually that helped the citizens instead of starting needless wars. So Richard, good to have you back. You served 24 years in the Army. Today's the 250th anniversary of the creation of the Army. So before we get to the bad news and all of the things that are happening today that I really want you to comment on, tell me about your experience in the Army. Was the Army good to you?
I absolutely loved the military. I loved it when I was enlisted. I loved the discipline. I loved it when I switched over and become an officer. The camaraderie that you hold with people, especially people that you do things like jumping out of airplanes with, rappelling out of helicopters. Those kind of jobs really do make people very, very close. When you do dangerous things together, when you serve in combat, those are friendships that go with you for the rest of your life.
And you're now running in North Carolina 9 for Congress. That's where Fort Bragg is.
Yes.
How many years did you spend at Fort Bragg?
I got around close to 16 years on Fort Bragg. Now I would leave and go to Iraq, Afghanistan, Haiti, Korea, and my family stayed in Fayetteville the entire time. So my kids were educated there. So when we made the decision to leave West Virginia, it was only right to come back to this area.
So now, as a guy who just told us, he enjoyed his service in the Army, happy to contribute to America and our defense, and I certainly did, right? When you see the Army in the streets of Washington, D.C. for this parade, how do you feel about it? Do you have mixed emotions? How do you feel?
I think it's garbage. I look, you know what? We don't have dictators. Donald Trump is a wannabe dictator, so he wants his dictator parade. This is a waste of money. It's a waste of time. Soldiers should be training. They should be doing all kinds of other things other than trying to, make some man-child happy so he can, look like he's playing with his army. I sit and listen to you talk a little while ago, and it's kind of funny to listen to Donald Trump talk about all these battles that he never had the guts to stand up and serve in, and neither did anybody in his entire bloodline. I mean, this is where we are. I tell you right now, the No Kings rallies across this country absolutely far outnumbered anything that we saw in the streets of Washington, D.C. today.
Yeah, so actually, you know what? Let me go to that map real quick. So this is the protests that were planned across the street, across the country, I should say, today. Potentially up to thousands of them, because they're in major cities, but they're also in small communities all across the country. And they call it No Kings, and that's about as American a message as you could possibly have. I mean, the first time we used the Army was against the king, because we didn't want kings. So no, I'm going to get to LA in a second, but Richard, tell me how you feel about these protests and the enormous number of people who showed up versus, like you said, what happened in Washington here.
I was literally, in awe. I went this morning to Fayetteville, North Carolina, had a great No Kings rally. Then after that, I drove back here to Southern Pines for another one. And I tell you, the crowd in Southern Pines was over 500 people. I mean, everywhere that we're going, Fayetteville was even bigger than that. I mean, they're angered, they're mad because, they're watching our country get dissected. I'm gonna tell you another thing. I see people waving their swords now. Donald Trump is gonna be really quick to wave these swords. But you know what? We should not allow them to send one single soldier into harm's way until you fix the Veterans Administration that you have recently just gutted. They got rid of almost 8,000 people in the VA, and now they're targeting another 80,000. So once again, now they're talking about going other places and picking more fights. Not one single person should be sent to any combat zone until our Veterans Administration is 100% fixed and operational.
Yeah, I mean, the image of putting on this ostentatious parade while you're cutting Veterans Affairs. I mean, it's just the hypocrisy is exhausting. They just do it over and over and over again. So, Richard, we now have not just National Guard, not asked for by the governor, which then makes it illegal, but also Marines in this city of Los Angeles in the streets. Did you ever think that we'd see Marines in the streets of American cities?
Let me tell you something, unacceptable. And this is absolutely not right for the Marines. It's not. I mean, these are Marines. They're not there to put their hands on American soldiers, or American citizens. This is Donald Trump. This is Donald Trump wanting to try and hurt people. And let me tell you something. He sent those Marines specifically to go there and actually do some damage. And I'm glad that it did not happen the way that he wanted. But this is unacceptable. They were peacefully protesting. What we saw in California, we are given 5 freedoms in the First Amendment alone. Freedom of the press was absolutely silenced. They were shooting press members with rubber bullets. The right to petition the government, the right to peacefully assemble, the freedom of speech. Those 4 things were trampled on, and we watched. Americans watched this happen. And this is what happens when you have somebody in the Oval Office that is a wannabe dictator. And it's unacceptable. This is not something that we should be standing for in this country. And once again, this guy is absolutely a hazard to our democracy.
Look, I'm afraid of the militarization of the country, and now, not only do we have these, Marines in the streets, not as part of a parade, but we're now adopting some of the policies that we're seeing in parts of the world that are in war. So Israel, of course, has killed more journalists than, unfortunately, all the wars that I mentioned combined: World War I, World War II, Afghanistan, Vietnam. All those conflicts combined, Israel has killed more journalists in Gaza than all of those. And so now we're in LA and they're firing, for the moment being, rubber bullets and hitting journalists from all across the world. It's just frightening. So Ben, I want to bring you back in here. I want to show you the US military bases around the world. This is graphic 14. And this is gonna tie into the mood in the country and what we should be doing. And it's gonna tie into the war that just got started in Iran as well. But as you look at the map, there's a total of, and I didn't know this, and Richard, you probably know this a hell of a lot better than we do, 845 bases across the globe.
Yeah.
Oh my God, look at that.
Yes,
right.
And if you don't realize this, a lot of people don't know that when Donald Trump became the president the second time, one of the first things that he did was he killed the news media on every installation where American troops are at and replaced it with Fox, Newsmax, and OAN. So now our military is drinking from the fountain of Fox.
Yeah, I mean, that map is why calling it the Department of Defense is a misnomer. I mean, this is not the array that you would have if you were looking to defend the geography of the United States of America. This is the array that you would have if you were looking to control the entire world militarily. And the American people don't want to control the rest of the world. They don't want to be the world's policeman. And it's really expensive to control the entire world. I mean, my guess is that close to half of our Pentagon budget is spent on trying to control the rest of the world. And it's a fool's errand because we can't do it, and it creates more terrorists than we can kill.
Well, I will tell you that we sure do need a lot of oversight because you know what? We spend a lot of money. We spend a lot of the military industrial complex makes a fortune. And let me tell you something, they want us at war because they benefit when we are at war. And I will tell you, you know what, in Afghanistan, we were building roads in areas where the people only had 2 donkeys and a cart. But we were there and we were building those roads. Those people didn't have cars. It's all about this. You know what? It's not about the troops, it's about this. And make no mistake about it, they will put any one of us into harm's way as long as this is what they get.
Yeah. So Richard, obviously that leads us to Iran, where we're now in another potentially huge war in the Middle East. And can you discern what in the world we're doing in Iran? How does that help defend America?
It doesn't. And I will tell you, it's another place that is not beatable. I mean, the terrain in Iran is worse than Afghanistan. Look, we win the fights. We won all the fights, but we didn't win the war because it's almost impossible to take these areas. And Iran is going to be nothing more than a place for us to go and shed blood, lose life, break our country, break the bank for what? For nothing, for nothing. So that the military industrial complex can continue to rake it in.
Ben, were you going to jump in there?
Yeah, I was just going to mention that the bomb makers love it. They just use a tremendous amount of bombs. I mean, in Gaza, I think we provided, what was it, 50 tons or 500 tons of bombs per square mile. Yeah, I mean, but I mean, yes, it makes gobs of money for the war profiteers and the weapons manufacturers, but it creates more security threats for the US. It creates terrorists. It creates people that are really pissed at us because we killed their fathers or their sons or their brothers or sisters.
Yeah, and so let me give you a quick. I want to talk a lot more about that, but I want to give you a quick update on the No Kings protest that we mentioned. Richard was talking about in small towns across the country, if 500 people showing up, which is really huge number for small towns. In New York, 50,000 showed up for No Kings protest. That is a huge number. And so, and as you're watching the fireworks here, this is the conclusion of the military parade. We're going to tell you a little bit more about this and all the things that we're talking about, but I want to make sure you knew that. Unfortunately, there has been some arrests and some violence. There was 8 arrests in Georgia at the No Protest rally. And then a man drove his vehicle into a crowd in the No Kings protest in Culpeper, Virginia. And unfortunately, some local authorities were threatening violence against the protesters, and so was Donald Trump. So actually, before we do anything else, I want to go to those clips. Marissa, let's go to the Donald Trump clip D1 threatening violence against protesters.
We're going to be celebrating big on Saturday. We're going to have a lot of, and if there's any protester wants to come out, they will be met with very big force. By the way, for those people that want to protest, they're going to be met with very big force. And I haven't even heard about a protest, but this is people that hate our country, but they will be met with very heavy force.
So, Richard, for a guy who claimed that he was in favor of freedom of speech, I mean, he focused on that in 2020 and 2024 elections. How is this for one of the most un-American things you've seen? If you dare protest me, I'm going to cancel your freedom of speech and a hell of a lot more.
Yeah, this is it. This is why we had the No Kings rally, because we're not going to bow to a king. We're not going to allow Donald Trump to turn our democracy into a dictatorship. And that's what he wants. This was more about, hey, Putin, look what I've got. Look at my toys. My toys are bigger. That's what this is. It's a slap in the face to our men and women in uniform. They are there for a reason, not to be Donald Trump's little toys. And that's exactly what he has done with that. It's a slap in the face. It's unacceptable. And you know what? This is one of the reasons why I tell people, you know what? In 2026, you better vote like this is the last time you're ever going to vote, because it could be if we don't win these fights.
Yeah, CNN is reporting that there was almost as many anti-Trump counter protesters as people who went to go see the parade in Washington, D.C. today.
More than that, all over I think San Diego is like some of the biggest crowds they've ever seen. People are angered. People are tired of this garbage. Donald Trump is a buffoon. He is a man-child. And once again, there's nothing worse than somebody trying to talk tough that never had the daggone guts to even step in and fight anybody. That guy's probably never won a fight in his life. He probably, maybe if he fought his sister or something, but she probably whipped him.
Well, to be fair, he really does have those bone spur issues in his heels.
Yeah.
So
you do know I have bone spurs too, and I got multiple trips to combat. Yeah.
But the bone spurs knocked Trump out, even though he's such a tough guy.
Yeah.
Speaking, and by the way, just on the crowd size, real quick. Yeah, I'm talking about just Washington D.C. The rest of the protests combined are 1,000 times bigger than the people watching the military parade in Washington, and New York alone, let alone the rest of the country. So speaking of false tough guys, Richard, I'm going to show you a sheriff down in Florida. And so I'm a little worried about this kind of talk, right? Look, you put your hands on a cop, you should go to jail, right? So nobody's disputing that. We don't want any violence in any direction, in any way, shape, or form. And obviously we all believe in civil disobedience and civil rights movement, and you believe in peace, and that's how you conduct yourself, right? But now here's the other side, and look at the violence that they threaten. Watch.
If you throw a brick, a firebomb, or point a gun at one of our deputies, we will be notifying your family where to collect your remains at, because we will kill you graveyard dead.
So Richard, as you look at the now government authorities, I mean, I thought there was those flags that the right wing flew about "Don't tread on me," and now you got government officials saying that if you're in the protesting and you do something we don't like, we're going to kill you graveyard dead.
this guy's just another Clay Higgins out there, just trying to, act like they got all this bravado. I mean, first and foremost, you're not going to do anything. You're going to sit behind your desk and do nothing. It's your deputies that are out there that are going to be doing the things that they need to do to keep people safe and deal with people that are, causing issues. It's just, once again, just another guy that wants to try to act like he's tough. And the truth is, a guy like that's never really been tested. He's probably never, ever squeezed a trigger on anybody, but he wants to talk and act like it's something that he would do like that. But the truth is probably he probably wouldn't have the guts to do it.
So guys, I want to ask both of you this. Ben and I talked about it a little bit earlier, but Richard, you're running in a district that for the moment being is Republican, right? But you might change that pretty soon.
I'm going to change it.
Yeah, but certainly got a lot of Republican voters, of course. But these days, a lot of Republican voters are anti-war, and Ben went on Tucker Carlson's show, and Tucker Carlson's calling out Donald Trump now and saying, no, you're complicit in this war, and we should not be in this war. And a huge Marjorie Taylor Greene came on our show and said we shouldn't be giving Israel any more money for any of these wars. And so a portion of MAGA, let alone independents are totally on our side, have started to flip over and saying, yeah, maybe we are getting screwed over by corporate interests and other interests, and so what do you see, Richard, in terms of independents and some right-leaning voters and their frustration with endless war?
It doesn't take a rocket science to look at Donald Trump and know that he is a buffoon, that the things that he says is garbage. We had a Where's Richard Hudson town hall here, and of course he didn't show up. But he's my opponent. He's the one that told everybody no more town halls. When a Republican says no more town halls, what they're saying is they don't got anything good to speak to the people about. So they would rather avoid the people. And I will tell you that while we were there, I had independents walking up to me, and I had Republicans that are not MAGA. They're actually moving closer to the middle. And those are the people that we need on our side. And if we get them on our side, we will flip seats across this country. Because let me tell you something, there's a lot of Republicans out there that know that MAGA is absolutely lost in the sauce, and there's no helping that 20% of people. But the rest of them are starting to come to the middle. The rest of them are smart enough to see that Donald Trump is an absolute, he is the laziest man to ever occupy the chair. He is the dumbest man to ever occupy the chair. He is the most corrupt man to ever occupy the chair. Everything about him is open to see. It's easy to see. And people are starting to wake up. And I believe that we are going to take back the House in 2026. And I believe that we're going to actually take back some seats in the Senate. And you know what? We may not need to get enough seats to control the Senate to be able to get rid of Donald Trump, because there are people that are in the Senate that are starting to realize now that this guy is absolutely a buffoon. I mean, come on. Rand Paul is now even stepping up and talking about how Donald Trump is wrong. And when that happens, they've lost this battle.
Yeah, I like that sign in the No Kings protest we were just showing, people over billionaires. Yes, please, please. So Ben, we were talking to Colonel Wilkerson earlier about this mighty empire and the group of folks, a limited group of folks inside the government, outside the government, who push for this imperial empire instead of helping the American people. And it seemed to me that we were talking to him, Ben, that my God, the left by itself and the right by itself and the middles by themselves, we're not going to be able to take them on. They're too strong. That we have to unite. That we have to be a United States of America to take on these corporate interests that are driving us into these wars, et cetera. And by the way, just for the audience to realize, look, yes, Israel has a huge role in pushing us in the war in Iran. They struck, and they know that our soldiers are sitting ducks in the middle of the Middle East. They're more likely to get struck. They're not protected by Iron Dome. It's going to drag us into the war. We're already in the middle of that war, et cetera, right? And it's just maddening to see. But also, the defense contractors will make a ton of money from this war. And also, oil prices are through the roof, so the oil companies are ecstatic, right? So Ben, the super hard question of, yes, but how? How do we unite these forces that have been fighting each other so much over these decades to be able to take our government back?
I really think that we need to start focusing on those things that we agree on. There are a bunch of things that I think Republicans agree on, that Democrats agree on, independents agree on, and one of them is everybody hates war. And I think another big part of it is that the majority of Americans of all stripes, they don't want our country to be the policeman of the world. And I think that, the reality is that the armed services are having a hard time recruiting. They can't fill their ranks because people of military age are realizing that it's not about defending the United States. I mean, if it was about defending the United States, people would be enlisting in droves. But they're seeing what the Army is used for, and they're seeing that it doesn't relate to the security of the United States. And I really think that the reality is that these incursions into other countries makes us less secure because it creates enemies. So I think that is something that's in common between people of all different political stripes. And yeah, I mean, I went on the Tucker Carlson show. I mean, there's a lot of things that Tucker believes that I disagree with, but I want to focus on the stuff that we do agree on, because that's the only way we can make anything happen. Otherwise, we're deadlocked, and the status quo continues, and the status quo sucks.
Yeah, Ben. I had a huge debate with Tucker Carlson at Politicon. I mean, I've done, I don't know, probably over 100 videos criticizing Tucker Carlson, right? And very, very harshly, and he's done likewise, right, for us. But look at Rebellion PAC, which now Richard's, Rebellion PAC's endorsed Richard, right, in his race. By the way, Ojeda for NC.com, Ojeda for NC.com. Rebellion PAC is taking Ben's idea basically and saying, hey, why don't we unite around the things that we agree on? So lower drug prices. Of course, Medicare should negotiate drug prices. It's insane not to. It's anti-capitalist, anti-free market not to. Lower housing prices. Don't let private equity buy all of our residential homes. They're going to rob us of our wealth creation asset, the one asset we have, our middle class. Paid family leave so moms can get some time off. And money out of politics, for God's sake, money out of politics. If we don't do that, by the way, Richard got a bill passed, and I worked on that, and when he was in West Virginia, right? And then, most importantly, well, look, these are all super important, but anti-war, no more wars, right? So Trump ran on that. And now, as we're in the middle of the Iran war, and then when I say we're in the middle, we're literally knocking down missiles, Iranian missiles. And not only that, we provided the intelligence for the bombing campaign in Iran. So we're involved in the offense, we're involved in the defense. And Richard, I mean, anti-war seems to unite us, yet our leaders constantly ignore it. And Trump, with maybe the ultimate betrayal of his own base here, by getting us right in the middle of that Iran war.
Our military has been betrayed multiple times over the few years. We no longer have a good retirement program now. It's a 401k. And oh, by the way, when you've got a buffoon in the Oval Office that's constantly tanking the daggone economy, your 401ks take big hits. So you got people serving in the military that, shoot, if things keep going the way they're going, when they get to the age where they're ready to retire, there's not going to be nothing for them. Sending people to war should be the last thing that we do. Let me tell you something. It doesn't matter if you're a combat soldier or not. If you're taken away from your family and you're sent to a combat zone, you don't have to be a trigger puller. You don't have to be a door kicker. I'm going to tell you that there was a lot of people that didn't leave the wire, but those mortars and those rockets come in almost like clockwork all the time. Everybody comes back missing something. That is a fact. And right now, we've got people that are attacking our Veterans Administration. They killed the program that operated the phones for the suicide hotline. Don't tell me you care about soldiers and kill the capability that helps reduce the suicides. This is where we are in this country. We have a buffoon who has an administration where nobody is qualified to do the jobs that they're doing. They're just in those positions because Donald Trump, maybe they bought it, or maybe Donald Trump just needs to put somebody there. Just remember, we are right now in the midst of World War III, and the guy in charge of protecting the United States of America from terrorism is a 22-year-old who's got a background in grocery stores and gardening. Congratulations. Yeah, that's the guy that's going to save us.
That is literally true, by the way. He's referring to an actual guy in a super important role that has absolutely no experience. Why would you put a guy like it? You couldn't find a single guy not above the age of 22. Anyway, you guys are seeing these beautiful pictures, by the way. I mean, just street after street, city block after city block of protesters of Donald Trump and his way of governing. And we didn't look. Now when I say we didn't ask for this, I can really speak for the whole country, because not only did the left not ask for this, but the right didn't ask for wars either. They were very, very explicit in not asking for wars. So Richard, on that front, look, I love that. I just hope more people join the rebellion, and that looks like a rebellion to me, right? As I see those streets, but. One of the things I kind of mentioned in passing there, I really want to ask you before we let you go. Iron Dome protects Israel, and and we got aircraft carriers there, and we're shooting down missiles, and even Jordan is shooting down missiles. So Israel's very well protected. A couple have got through, but overall very well protected, right? But our troops all over the Middle East not protected. Are they sitting ducks there waiting to get hit?
Absolutely. Iraq, Djibouti, Kuwait, Bahrain. I mean, we've got bases all over the world over there. And make no mistake about it, they don't have iron domes over them. So it's only a matter of time before, those troops end up probably being attacked. And once again, I mean, this is, my goodness gracious, we don't need any more wars, but make no mistake about it, that will give Donald Trump the permission to get us back into this. And once again, you're going to sit here and you're going to rattle the sabers of war while you are currently dismembering the Veterans Administration. How dare you send the next soldier into harm's way when you're killing the daggone capability to fix us when we come home?
Yeah. As usual, Richard speaks with clarity. So everybody check out OjettaForNC.com. And I would look before Richard goes and we wrap up. I need you guys to understand something. He's in a district that Washington thinks Democrats can't win. I've talked to reporters about it, Richard. You don't know this, but I did. And they say, oh, no, you guys can't win that district, okay? But Richard closed, when he ran in West Virginia back, because of these family situations, they had to go back and forth between two states, right? When he ran in West Virginia, he closed 43 points against Republicans. So if Richard wins, that's why I'm asking you to help him, right? Whether you're gonna chip in or you're gonna be a volunteer, etc. If Richard wins, it sends a clear message across the country. No, we can win anywhere.
Yes.
And our message is very, very popular. This is not the old Democratic Party. This is the new Democratic Party. We're going to do the most popular bills there are. All of the bills that I mentioned in Rebellion PAC are 65% or higher in popularity. Independents love them. Richard's got to win. If he wins, it changes the dynamic in Washington. Not only does it make you realize and makes the reporters, very, very stubborn mainstream media reporters realize No, economic populism works. Anti-war works. Money out of politics works. That's what the American people want. But it also gets the Republicans back on their heels. And now starting to worry, oh, did we start too many wars? Did we make a mistake? Are there going to be more Ojettas in Congress? That's what you want them thinking. Ben.
I want Ojeda in Congress. I'm going to make a contribution. What was that website again?
OjettaForNC.com. So, Richard, you got some of that Ben and Jerry's sweet money coming your way.
That's what I'm talking about. And let me tell you something. I can win this. We're putting boots on the ground everywhere. People are coming up to us. They're, like I said, I've had independents, I've had Republicans come up to me and say, I like what you're saying. So we're going to flip this seat from red to blue. We're going to get to Washington, D.C. And I'm going to tell you, I'm going to push legislation. I want to see legislation. I want to overturn Citizens United. You know, there's a lot of work that we've got to do, but we got to put the right people in those positions to do that work, and make no mistake about it, I am that guy.
I know you are, brother. OjettaForNC.com. Richard Ojeda, retired major from the United States Army. We appreciate you joining us today.
Anytime, Cenk, anytime.
All right. Okay, guys, as we wrap up here, I want to give a thank you to all the people that made this possible, including the folks who just joined the Young Turks because of this coverage. Mariposa, Oscura, Alex Sharon, Jamie Philman, and so many others. Thank you for hitting that join button below on YouTube. We appreciate you. You could also join through tyt.com/join. And Ben, I want to read you last couple of comments here that people wrote in, our members wrote in on tyt.com. Asimov's prophet said, damn, I should have gotten some Ben and Jerry's for this.
That's what I was thinking. I was thinking I should have had a pint with me.
See, I didn't make the mistake you guys made. I got it this morning. Yeah, I got peanut butter cup and is waiting for me in a minute. Okay, and then, but importantly, subversive queer username Dragon wrote, I'm watching CBS coverage and it's pretty brainwashed. They're acting like this is normal. And guys, the reason I tell you that is because we're doing coverage that's different than all the mainstream media. The other day, I watched a cable news segment. I couldn't believe it. I mean, they had all these establishment guys, and one guy who's pretending is a Republican, and he was yelling at MAGA, and he was saying, "How dare you guys be against this war in Iran? You're so unsophisticated. If you were sophisticated, you wouldn't be like children against a war." I'm like, and then by the way, he didn't make any points in favor of why we should be in war. Just know the smart elites know that you should always be in war, right? So yeah, we don't do that junk coverage. We do real people coverage here. And by the way, give you real facts. So which leads me to the last two comments here. Trump lawyer wrote in, screen capping all this information. Damn, here it is all in stats, right? And we showed you all of the information. You know, so mainstream media claims, oh, we're objective, et cetera. Yeah, but did you show people the defense budget? Did you show them compared to all the other nations on earth? Did you show them how we're not feeding our kids, we're not educating our kids because of all that waste that goes to Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, and not to our troops? Richard's exactly right, not to our troops. It goes to those giant defense companies. And finally, Jack Callahan wrote in, Cenk, that was one of the best interviews on TYT in a long time with Colonel Wilkerson. And that's why we brought all these folks on, right? Richard Ojeda, Nina Turner, Colonel Wilkerson, and so many others, because we wanted you guys to know the real numbers, the real facts, and the information about what we're doing. And yes, you know, we're gonna clip these up and put them up on online as well. If you're a Young Turks member, you get all of this anytime you want. But you got to watch that Colonel Wilkerson interview. You got to see Richard Ojeda's interview. You got to see these things because Colonel Wilkerson explained, yes, there are a group of elite individuals inside and outside the government. He knows, he was a chief of staff for Colin Powell during the Bush administration when they took us into the Iraq war. There are people like John Bolton, right, and others who are constantly trying to push us in a war, not for the interests of the American people, but for the interests of the very wealthy and the elites that run these defense contractors and run these corporations that profit from this. What we've got to do is recapture the government for the American people. We've got to get back to representatives actually representing us. And so that's what we're trying to do.
That was what it was supposed to be about, I heard. Government of the people, by the people, for the people.
For the people.
Yeah, baby, I was into that.
Yeah, 100%. And Ben mentioned it earlier in the show. I said it in my book. We've turned the government of the people, by the people, for the people into government by the corporations, for the corporations, of the corporations. We've got to end that. We've got to bring real people back into Congress like Richard Ojeda and Randy Bryce and so many others that are run for office. You have an option now. You have an option. And more people are going to join the rebellion. And more people are going to say enough is enough. And enough with the labels too. Forget what you called us before, Democrat, Republican, independent, right wing, left wing. No, we all need to be Americans now, okay? We don't want the military in our streets and we don't want the military in Iran. Bring them back home and have them serve the purpose they're supposed to.
Yep.
All right, so to everybody out in the audience, to Ben Cohen, to our producers here who were so wonderful to do this on a Saturday, to Richard Ojeda and all of our guests, thank you guys. Thank you for trying to bring the truth to the American people. Thank you for fighting in all the different ways that you do. And make sure you check out Up in Arms, which is what Ben launched on Thursday. That's another great way to help to see what the reality in this country is. So we've covered both the military parade here and the No Kings protests. And we're going to sign off here. Richard Ojeda, Cenk, Uygur, Ben Cohen. Thank you guys. We appreciate you so much. And we'll see you on Monday at 6 o'clock Eastern.
Thank you, and thank you, Ben.
Thank you, Cenk. Take care.